and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's live discussion on the House of the Dragon Season 1 finale, The Black Queen. I'm really excited to talk about this big finale and with the original trio, the original trinity, the triarchy. First, the Black Queen herself, Alyssa. Thanks so much for joining.
Hi, hi. Yeah, just before we came on here, Eric came over and brought me my crown. I had to clarify. Wait, are you Eric or are you Arik? Oh, okay, cool. Thank you for the crown. So I am now ready to go.
And of course, from D's Reviews, Darrin. Thanks so much.
Oh yeah, very glad to be back and be able to wrap up this show with you two. I really can't wait to dive into talking about this big finale.
Cool. So yeah, let's get thoughts on the episode as a whole. To start with, I will say I like this episode better than last week's, mainly because it didn't have the fake stakes. It didn't feel the need to create plot, which I feel like they did. Even I do like last week's episode. And Darrin, I suppose when we get to you can give your opinion real quick on last week.
Sure.
But yeah, I liked it better because I feel like as much as I did like last week's episode, I feel like it created fake stakes in order to keep it on the greens. Where here, I felt like it could keep it on the blacks, but not have to create things that felt unnatural or added in. It did a lot of like really interesting character beats and it changes from the book, which I actually do like because mainly having to do with which they already did with Allison, but now they're doing it with Rhaenyra, where they're giving her more of a character arc. Which we could talk a little bit more about because I just read that chapter of Fire and Blood like today, and so I was like, yeah, she's ruthless in the book, but in the show they changed her to make her different, which I like, and I think it's interesting that she was showing restraint, and this is what actually won Rhaenys over, and her trying to sort of coming from this weaker position and trying to build. Her house, and I think this episode did a really great job of doing it. That ending scene, I knew what was going to happen. I was still terrified and suspense on the edge of my seat for it. The way it was filmed was beautiful. So absolutely loved this episode. So Darrin, since you were absent last week, we'll start with you on this one.
I love that we can kind of continue our little review tete-a-tete because I think last week was probably my favorite episode of the season.
Oh, really?
Which was interesting because to me it was the tension that was carried out, and yeah, obviously they were trying to keep it focused on there, and I did like that they did the final split, 9 with King's Landing and then 10 over on Dragonstone, and kind of being able to separate those two stories. But no, I found last week's terrifying, and just the way the pressure is and who the decisions were, and kind of the reversals when Allison comes in is like, well, my father's dead, and he named Aegon to be son, so I think we're just, and Otto's like, okay, we go to plan 42B. All right, so you were heading over here, and you were. It's the kind of shock in her face when she's like, you guys have been planning this without me? It's like, come on. What do you think Otto's been pushing for all of these years? So it was kind of funny, but I just did love the tension. I loved, Rhaenys being pushed in the corner, and the Erics, who was going to do what, and their kind of split. Everybody being shoved down into the dungeons. I mean, I really loved how that tension was. And yes, really wanted Rhaenys to just torch them all at the end. But she was right coming into this. It's not her war to start. And I really appreciated how she maintained her strength throughout, even while everyone was bending the knee and bowing. She was still in the back like, I'm not really sure where I'm going to go yet. Until that wonderful little bit how she was, Rhaenyra was the one like holding on to the peace while everyone else is pushing for war. I mean, there was some, this said, last week may have been my favorite. I did love this one. I love that we got to sort of wrap everything up with these and the dragons and where these chess pieces are going to be set for the next set. And obviously not having read the book, wasn't aware of how it was how it was going to go, but I knew it like as soon as the kids were like, well, we should be the messengers. It's like, oh, one of you isn't coming back. Which one is it gonna be? But yeah, still an exciting bit. We'll get into all of that. But I love where it ended, and I think that final shot of Rhaenyra just staring at the camera like, oh, this shit's on now, was a perfect way to leave us for season 2.
I shall give my spiel, and then I'm going to take this crown off because it's a little too small for my head. So I love this episode. It was phenomenal. It was everything that I wanted last week's to be and did not get. Maybe it was tainted by my expectations from having read the book, but I talked about it last week. I wanted the whole episode to like be in the council room, and the tension to take place between Alicent and Otto. I'm taking this off now, but the tension between Alicent and Otto, rather than this pointless race against time to see who gets Aegon first, which ultimately at the end of the day is not going to amount to anything other than, I guess, it meant that Otto gets sent off to treat with Rhaenyra, and that's not. I guess Otto wouldn't have done that if he had gotten Aegon first. But that scene, even though Otto isn't there in the book, Orwell is there, is the only one there. That scene still happens, so you didn't need that. You didn't need that race against time, rather than that difference of opinion being presented in that way. It would have been so much more intense if it had happened in the council room, and I really wish they had done that. And there was no strategizing, there was no planning, there was no like, this is what we're going to do. We have what's the Lannister dude's name? Tyland Lannister mentions offhand that, oh, I think we need to try to propose a marriage to the Baratheons, and he gets cut off. And if you didn't read the book, maybe you didn't even hear him say that. It's like, I wanted more focus on that. I wanted more focus on the strategy. Here, this is exactly what I wanted last week. They have the big painted map. I love the map, how it was glowing, and they moved the chess pieces, and like, we need Winterfell over here. Let's put our chess piece here. We need Stormlands over here. We need the Riverlands over here. And I love that. Like, I wished that we had more of that last week, more of the political intrigue, and the infighting wasn't taking place via some silly race against time to get Aegon. It was taking place between Daemon and Rhaenyra in really interesting ways that I'm sure we will get into. And then also we have Rhaenys, we find out, is not really committed, even though she did race over there to warn Rhaenyra. She, as Darrin said, she does say this was not my war to fight, and she's not committed necessarily. And that doesn't mean she's going to go join Team Green, but being neutral is on the table, and that's indeed what Corlys ends up suggesting. Let's just stay out of this. That was on the table. So she hasn't decided yet. So we have that kind of infighting. And then we have the really fascinating scene that I'm sure we'll get to later with Corlys and Rhaenys. And so we had so much drama and tension that was lacking for me last week that I love that they delivered this week. Plus, we had so many great scenes, and we'll get to, I'm sure, the bridge scene, kind of a callback to that episode 2, but a little different. I loved the twist on the episode 2 scene. And the ending scene, having read the book, I knew it was coming, but they far exceeded my expectations as far as how they did it on screen. It was fantastic. We'll get into the details when we get to it, but I loved it so much. So yeah, absolutely love this finale. They really stuck the landing. Great finale, and to a great season.
Cool, awesome. Well, I wanted to address what Joseph in the chat was saying because that was kind of funny. Saying last week terrified me as well, seeing a group of committed people overthrowing the government. I'm so glad we don't have to worry about that in real life at all. Anyway, yes, and I was talking about some comparisons to modern day life, to how people, all they have to do is say that they're the ruler, and they get a bunch of other people to follow them and believe it. even though there's nothing that really back them up, no legal things. But anyway, so um, yeah, so let's go ahead and jump into this episode. And Alyssa, I believe you wanted to start with the scene with Luke and Rhaenyra talking, but I kind of fuzzy on this scene. Can you remind me about what exactly?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on that scene because that's the intro of the episode where we have Luke looking at the map and he's really reluctant to take the Driftmark throne, and he's the Driftwood throne. He's like, I don't deserve it, and I'm not perfect like you. And Rhaenyra gives him a hug and says, I'm far from perfect. And I want to touch on this because I'm curious. Like, I'm curious to hear from Darrin or anyone who hasn't read the book. Did you read this as, oh, that guy's dead? Because I heard another like non-book reader say, oh yeah, it was so like, because for me, knowing what's coming for this character and knowing most likely it is happening at the end of this episode, I was like, oh no, they're showing us how sweet their love is for each other and they're gonna kill him off. I'm like, oh no. But I'm just curious if like people that hadn't read the book were like, oh, they're killing that kid off, or I don't know what you kind of thought of that. But that was my reaction, was like, oh no, oh my god, I can't believe they're doing that. Of course they have to do that to build this character up a little bit before you kill him.
Like before Darrin answers, I will say, to be honest, like I knew what was coming, but I didn't even think of that when I saw that scene. But once the episode was over, I looked back in retrospect, and I'm like, oh yeah, they were like, I actually thought it was genius how they were like building that scene and building him up more and making you like him before they kill him. So I thought it worked. But Darrin,
no, I mean, I knew he was doomed later on, but I didn't catch it quite at the beginning here. And I guess to me, I just sort of caught this as the moment in the life of like, here she is being a good mom and talking to her kid and doing the great things and making a good adult. And oh, King's dead. Time for the doom to start. So I didn't see it as that. I could totally see how it's played. But no. I suspected he was going to die before he actually did. But not quite at this point. So I think that was good.
Yeah, I would argue it was actually well done. I don't think it, because there's some shows and movies that don't do it well, that make it too telegraphed. Oh yeah, this guy's dead. Like I think we talked about this in the Strange New Worlds, that Alien ripoff episode, where you had those characters and you saw, oh, you're getting promoted. Some characters you never heard of. I'm like, yeah, he's gonna die halfway through the episode. And sure enough, he did. So I didn't think it was as telegraphed as that. Like I didn't even knowing that he was going to die, I didn't really pick up on it. It's like was it Hot Shots where they had the dead meat character? It was like, oh, this is my wife, and I know where Jimmy Hoffa is buried.
Oh, the secret's to Kennedy's death. I'm gonna keep it right on me. Yeah.
I'll give it to you right when I get back. Yeah, so I didn't think it was as bad as that. Like I didn't think it was too telegraphic, because had he not died at the end of the episode, it would have fit perfectly as Darrin says, a mother trying to get the son. But in retrospect, knowing how it ends, it does serve as sort of showing you the love between these characters before it ends.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, it was definitely a smart way to do that, because I think one of the shortcomings that the episode has with its big tragedy at the end, and even some of the other ones that we see before, is because of the cast changes, we haven't had long to identify with these actors in these roles. I mean, I think this is one episode, maybe the second that they've been at this age. So I think that it's good that they're going to make that choice to identify with a character that is going to die. It fills in the scene well. It does give us that connection. But I think that's needed even more, because we're still like, okay, now which one is this? Is this the younger one or the older one we're talking about here? So yeah, I think that was nice.
All right. Yeah. So, Alyssa, did you think it was too telegraphed, or did
no? Because but see, the thing is, like, I knew it was coming, so I was just curious to get another perspective. So for me, it wasn't too telegraphed, because I already knew that it was happening. So for me, it was more like, oh no, they're doing this. Oh no, they're gonna make a sweet little scene and get us all attached. And no, he's gonna die. But I was just curious if others thought it was too telegraphed. I felt like I couldn't really judge from my perspective. So it's interesting to hear you guys say that.
Yeah, because I knew it was coming, but it didn't even occur to me while I was watching this scene that they were doing. I didn't even catch on to that. But yeah, in retrospect, that does make sense. All right, so let's go into the whole miscarriage scene, which is, we've already had a really brutal miscarriage scene in the first episode, so it's kind of symmetry that they end the season on another brutal miscarriage scene. But this is from a very different perspective. And of course, we had another one midway through the season as well. But so this one's a different perspective, and the mother actually doesn't die this time, which is good. But it's you could tell it was really brutal to me, the way that Rainey showed up, and they were like, "Oh, Rainey, is you have news of Corliss? That's why you're here, right?" And it's like, "No, your dad's dead, and your freaking half brother usurped the throne." Great to see you. How you doing? And of course, Rhaenyra's reaction is to go, "Oh," is just to have physical pain, and so it's really implying what they made clear in the book is that stress is what put her into premature labor and ultimately caused the miscarriage. And in fact, in the book, this is something they didn't do in the show. She outright blames Alyssa, saying she killed my son for causing this stress, which I'm kind of glad the show didn't do that. As I said, the portrayal.
Daughter. Sorry to interrupt. There's a daughter in the book.
Oh, daughter.
Yeah, I don't know if they specified in the show, but I think it was a daughter.
No, you're right. It's a daughter. Yes, you're right. They did. I think they did say in the show that they were going to name her after one of
Vicinus or Vivis. Yeah, one of the sisters.
Yeah.
One of the Aegon sister wives.
Yeah, you're right. They did say daughter, in the show. But yeah, so that was so that was, I'm glad they didn't go that way. As I said, they're going a different way with Rhaenyra's character, but it was still a brutal scene. And then you also get they immediately, Daemon, as soon as starts planning a war. And I like how Rhaenyra calls, instead of calling Daemon, she calls her sons and be like, "Look, make sure Daemon doesn't do anything. Make sure no plans are done until I'm there. You have to wait for me." And so Luke, not Luke, Jace, who's the older one, goes to Daemon and is like, "Well, my mother said not to make plans." And it's like, "Did you hear what I said?" Like the queen says not to make plans. He's like, "All right, whatever." But he was all willing, ready to start a war and fuck this shit. You can see how fiery Daemon is, and Rhaenyra smart enough to know that would be her reaction, even though she was in absolute agony and going through this horrible tragedy, was clear enough in the mind to at least accomplish that. So I thought it was really interesting. Alyssa, we'll start with you and your thoughts on this.
Yeah, no, I did too. I thought it was interesting, and of course, this is also from the book as well. I want to kind of talk about, though, because I listened to a podcast that was expressing an opinion that, and they were talking about, is not just the people in the podcast, but they've just heard this around. There's a lot of discourse. A lot of people are really upset by the scene. Allison mentioned in the chat that it was painful to watch. One of the dudes in the podcast was like, "I'm a father, and miscarriages are, he's a recent father. Miscarriages are something that you're really afraid of. There's something that are real, and it's from the book, sure, but did you need to be so graphic with it?" And this was not my reaction. I've not had a kid. This is not something that I related to. But at the same time, I'm not going to tell other people that they shouldn't be upset about that. They should just get over it, and it's fine. Also, there's the point of view that there is a lot of women suffering through pregnancy this season. And while I think George R. R. Martin, and he has said this before, that he does these kinds of scenes of the violence against women and these sorts of scenes to kind of shed light on the suffering of women, because as men, it's not something that we think about. But then there's some who feel like you're going a little bit too far, to the point where maybe you're not really doing a good thing here. Maybe you're just degrading women by constantly showing they're all they are is just these pregnancy is their battlefield, and that's all they are, these vessels, and which is the opposite of what he's trying to do. But maybe by showing it too much or being too graphic, that he's doing more harm than good. Now, that is not my point of view. That's not how I don't see it that way personally. But I did kind of want to throw that out there because I have heard from that podcast and then other sources that people, that is a discourse that's out there that people are really kind of upset by this. I do also feel that then people generalize to, oh, Game of Thrones, they just always have to go for shock value, which I don't know. I think what really bothers me is that people always like are hyper focused on Game of Thrones and like, point the finger at it. And yet, and the boys, like the butt scene at the beginning, if you know, all the exploding heads everywhere. Nobody says anything about that. I think that is a million times more gratuitous. So it really bothers me that people are, oh, the slightest little thing Game of Thrones does, like, oh no, they're too gratuitous and too shock value-y. But at the same time, I don't want to like dismiss or invalidate people who like might be triggered by those scenes. That maybe they shouldn't have gone so graphic. But that wasn't my thought process. I was kind of just thinking along the lines that you were, Mark. But I did kind of want to just throw that out there because that's a thing that's out there.
Yeah. Well, around my neck of the woods, I remember season 1, especially of Game of Thrones, being referred to as Game of Porn because of the amount of graphic nudity. House of the Dragon Alyssa subverted that to being Game of Born with the amount of childbirth that we have and waters breaking. And yeah. There does seem to be a little emphasis on the violence against women, both in the heavy childbirth scenes that we've had in the show. We have the scene with Daemon later on, which we'll get to, which is also a very kind of like male violence against women theme in a kind of a more direct way. Now, I don't know about the whole, I understand the pregnancy is a battlefield and thing to that. To me, it was almost like, this is like, man, these womanly things getting in the way of me being a queen and getting things done. Just get this baby out of me so I can get to work. There was almost a feeling of that to me, of like, this is such an inconvenience, especially now. I can't ride a dragon and go to war while pregnant. My God, we'll be done with this. I don't, again, I don't particularly like that point of view and so on, but that is the feel that I got from this as kind of the reaction and what was going on. So in the sense of stating how females really are not respected in this world, I think it just further kind of underplays this. You can't be queen because you're a girl, and we're going to usurp you because you're a girl and you're doing this. And you can't be pregnant because being in war doesn't allow you to do all of that. And there seems to be a lot of kind of, I don't know, underscoring of that sort of point of view. It worked, I have to say, for me, because it was kind of like, stuff has to get done and we need to clear all of this stuff out. And there was a mention in the chat about, where was the midwife? Where was the maester? Why wouldn't she allow anyone to help her? And I think this was really kind of Rhaenyra grabbing and forcibly pulling her destiny to her. I think it was all a matter of strength of will, and even the stillbirth effectively was a reason to do that, of her grabbing forth of that opportunity, and if by force of will alone, making that happen, which is something she's always done. Even the birth of her last kid, it was, I just gave birth and now I have to drag my butt up to the queen to present the kid. She's kind of always done that. And to me, this is almost like a forcible bit, especially, again, how it then ties in with how the episode wraps up. So I thought it was very powerful, but I was also like, can we move on from this stuff? I don't want any more babies born right now, man. This is a little too much for me.
Yeah, see,
Like-
Oh, you want to comment?
Go,
Mark?
yeah, go ahead, Alice.
I was going to say,
Alyssa.
I knew that this was an important scene in the book. I kind of maybe could have, if you're going to do too many childbirth scenes, the one to cut to me would have been when Jace is born at the beginning of episode 6, and she has to go up the stairs. Because we've now seen twice like how tough she is when when giving birth. I would have rather kept this one and cut that one out personally if you're thinking there's too much of it. And I kind of think they may have overdone it. I think the Lena scene also from the book was pretty important in a very powerful way for that character to go out. My only complaint about that is I wish we had more time with that character to get to know her better. Yeah. But I think this one was important and powerful. I get the point that it maybe like they didn't need to show like her ripping the baby out and the blood coming out. If that was a little triggering for you, I don't blame you. I didn't have a problem with it, but I could see the case for maybe tone that down a little bit. But I do think that the scene was important to have. If I were cut out anything, I would have cut out that previous birth.
What was and I'm curious for you guys, the flashbacks to the dragon faces that we saw in the midst of that was that
I heard
the price of the dragon? Or I mean, I couldn't really get where they were. I had a few guesses, of course, but I mean,
I heard the idea that this was Rhaenyra, like you have a connection with your dragon, so she was like that was her dragon that she was sort of telepathically connected to in some way, that they were connected. I don't know, but honestly, I don't know either.
Okay.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought too. The connection to her dragon.
Okay.
That the dragon was kind of feeling her pain.
All right. Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure if it was that or kind of like, the price of the dragon, or it's, the baby's being eaten, consumed for this thing, or, where the symbolism was going with that. So, but I like your idea. That works. It's easier.
So I wanted to address what Allison in the chat is saying, but I think Rhaenyra felt that her mother died in childbirth and wasn't going to let someone do that to her. Yeah, that could be it. And also, you touched on the her miscarriage, but I thought I'd point out that the show did change it from the books to give that character more agency, which than she had in the book, which I liked. Now, to be honest, when I knew this was happening because I read the book, and I was kind of hoping that they would forego this. Because I don't know why, but for some reason I was like, we don't really need this other miscarriage. It felt like it would, because they did it so much throughout the show already. It did feel like it's only 10 episodes. They're doing it so many times, but in the episode 8, they showed her she was pregnant, so I knew they were going to do it because she's pregnant with the third child that I knew would die in the miscarriage. But I did kind of wish they kind of went over it, and I can see. I agree, Alyssa. Like, I don't have that point of view, but I can definitely see how people could and why they would have such an issue, especially if they experience something similar in their lives. How maybe being as graphics is that not entirely necessary. So I can see how some people could be a bit triggered by that.
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate again that I see where you're coming from, Mark, as far as like hoping they skip over at this point, but they needed this one though. Like, I just feel like they should have skipped over the one at the beginning of episode 6. And you're right about Lena taking agency, so I like that one being there. But I think the unnecessary one for me is the one with Joffrey being born.
Sure.
We don't see him being born in the book. Like, we didn't need that one. So, but now that we've had that one, and then they put this one that I think they absolutely should have had, now it feels like it's too much because this is like the fourth. I think it was Brandon said somewhere in the chat, I'd be happy if there are no more childbirth scenes, and I agree. And I don't think there will be. I think they're done with the childbirth scenes. But yeah, I agree with that too.
Now, before we move on, I was wondering if you had any thoughts on the whole Daemon aspect of trying to do the War Council and her having to send Jace to stop him.
I personally love that, because again, it's Rhaenyra of just kind of like, look, this is not being done without me. I am now the queen I need to be in charge. Especially she has been sort of pushed away and everything throughout a lot of earlier stuff when she tried to be, and maybe that gives a good dichotomy between her old position and the new position, as she was never allowed to be, and now she's queen. She has to be, and they have to listen. But it does set up a nice, I think, energy and difference in intention between herself and Damon. That Damon is definitely like going to war and getting our guys and killing some people, and she really is trying to be more of the responsible type leader. And I think that is her nice first stage. And I love the fact that her kid was like reminding, hey, we said don't do anything until mom gets in. So we don't do anything until mom gets in. That was kind of a nice thing. It was really the first support that she has really had in being queen and not being pushed over by the men around her. So I think that was really kind of an important bit to happen.
Any thoughts, Alyssa, on that? Yeah, real quick. But I also there's one more thing I wanted to say about the baby too. Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of badass. Like, she's just really taking control and like showing, like, I am still the fucking queen. Like, I'm in charge here. Like, don't go start no war without me. It's like she's going up, like, while she's, going through that, and like, go tell your uncle and knock it off. Like, we're not uncle / stepdad. That we're not going to war until I say we are. Yeah, so I thought it was badass. But now, as far as like, I just wanted to say something about the babies. I'm sorry to be one of those annoying book readers, but I do have to point out a difference that I liked, and actually I don't consider it a change. So in the book, remember the book is written from the perspective of this archmaester who's looking back at history. I believe he's writing it at the time right before Robert's Rebellion, and he's looking back at history. And there's a lot of unreliable narrator stuff in there. And in the official history of it, the people say that the baby was born with scales and a dragon tail. I always thought that was urban legend and a myth, and so I like that the show didn't include that, because that's like reinforces my theory. Like, that was just that's the unreliable narrator. That was just like a myth that the small folks spread everywhere, and of course it didn't actually have dragon scales or a tail. It definitely is pretty deformed, which was also said in the book, but it didn't have a tail. I'm glad. I would have thought it would be silly if it did. So I like that they did it that way.
Yeah, actually, I agree. I was looking out for it. I was like, they're not going to give it a dragon's tail, are they? And I was glad they didn't. I thought that would have been dumb. And yeah, you can pass it off as just being like small folks, myths or whatever.
Well, it's one of those perfect kind of like, histories told by the victor. Because obviously, if they're not the winning team, they'd be like, oh, yes, and her last baby, yeah, she aborted it because it was a dragon. Yes, it was a dragon baby. She was evil like that.
Now, wasn't the Fire and Blood, I thought it was written by Maester, maybe I'm wrong, between the time of Robert's Rebellion and the War of the Five Kings, but it was before Robert's Rebellion? I thought it was after.
Oh, it could have been after. I could be mistaken on that. It's somewhere in that time period. Yeah. It could have been after. I thought it was just before Robert's Rebellion, but
I could be thinking of World of Ice and Fire, because I think that referenced Robert Rebellion, so that was after Robert's Rebellion.
Yeah, it could very well also be after Robert's Rebellion. I don't remember exactly, but it's in that. The point is, it's written in the future. It's like 200 years later.
Yeah, neither here nor there. All right. Yeah. Let's go ahead and I want to talk about the scene where Damon gets out the King's Guard, who already said, like, we're loyal to the Queen, we're loyal to Rhaenyra, but he wants to make sure. So he has this dragon show up, scare the shit out of them, and obviously intimidating them. It's like, look, I want to believe you guys are loyal, but if you're not, if you want to support, if you don't support us and you think Aegon should be the king, tell me now. I'll give you a very quick, merciful death. But if you swear your allegiance to her and then you betray us later, I will torture you. Will die screaming. And the dragon goes on, and Damon is, and we'll talk about this more and later in the episode. Is not really a good guy. He is a bit of a shady character, but do you kind of agree with him? Like, I don't know where I stand. On one hand, I think I can see why he's doing this because, yeah, absolutely. Like, you want to take them at their word, but you want to be sure. You want to be like, make sure they know. Look, if you're lying to me, if you betray us later, you're gonna fucking regret it. So I can see that, but on the other hand, they've given him no reason to show that disloyal. So it seems like by intimidating like this may make them not like him very much or not want to be loyal. I don't know. Darrin, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, because it was interesting because I think didn't he lead Luke off and say, "Let me show you what loyalty is," But he is in an interesting position because it is the Kingsguard who is there to protect the king. Now that the king's dead, are they going with the queen or the king? So, I mean, I understand the sense of kind of like, the FBI, supposedly, they're loyal to, the government, whoever is going to be the president, and that's their thing, and if they split off, that's a different type of stuff. I think you're looking at a similar type thing of like, look, your institution says you're going to protect the queen. So I just need to know which royal leader are you going to be protecting? He's certainly not one to let anyone go or to take prisoners. So I think that kind of defines his character. But on the other one, honestly, I thought he was kind of merciful. I was expecting him to like kill one as an example to the other one or something, devious like that, because you're right. Damon isn't really a good guy. So the fact that he was kind of straightforward and like, look, you guys say you're loyal, so I just need you to affirm that. And if you don't want to, I totally respect that, and I will give you a nice, clean death. But if you try to stab me in the back, then your ass is going to suffer. And honestly, I kind of respect that, especially in that type of world. Again, and I was like waiting for Damon to like figure out some example to do and to kill one or wound or something, and he didn't. And I think that works really great, and especially considering when Eric shows up afterwards, I think it just completely reinforces is that, hey, there are people that are really loyal to the queen, and you don't have to be so scared that Hightower's people are everywhere and are just waiting to stab you in the back, which I think is part of driving his suspicion as well.
And I wanted to quickly point out Lily Mack in the chat saying that you can't intimidate loyalty or love. This was not a smart move, which is an interesting point. But anyway, Alyssa, your thoughts?
Yeah, I was actually looking at Lily's next comment that you want people who love the new queen to be close to her, not guards who have been threatened. And I agree too. And it shows the contrasting leadership styles between Rhaenyra and Daemon. And so it shows again that Rhaenyra was right to stop Daemon from, tell Jace to stop Daemon from going to war, because this is how he is. She knows this. She knows this about him, that he is brutal. And this is not how she would do things. And it's interesting that he would, hey, Jace, come here. Let me show you how things are done. And I don't think Rhaenyra would approve of that, because that is not what Rhaenyra wants to teach her children. So I find that very interesting, and we see this manifest later in the episode as they have very different points of view of that they are very different. They have very different leadership styles, let us say. But I mean, who would you rather have? Would you rather have Eric, who escaped from the castle and stole Viserys's crown and went across the Blackwater Bay to take the crown and bend the knee and crown his queen? Or do you want these two guys that were like only there because they didn't want to get burned by dragons or are afraid that Daemon might torture them in the future? I mean, I'd rather have an Eric on my side. So yeah, it's a very interesting contrast.
Yeah, and I believe Damon took Jace out as direct response to Jace telling him, "My mother says stop what you're doing," and I think that's his direct response. All right, let me show you a little thing, and goes directly to the Kingsguard intimidating thing.
Yeah, that's correct. You're right. That's a good point.
Yeah. So I think that was kind of his way of getting back at him. Maybe I don't know. But yeah, that's
There's plenty of
yeah.
dick swinging in this show. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's like, no, here, let me show you what I got right here.
But I think Rhaenyra did specifically go out of her way to choose Daemon as her husband. Like, had to kill off her present husband in order to do it. So I think she did to an extent want that brutality on her side. She could see the advantage of it.
Yeah. I think she's just hoping that she can kind of focus it a little bit more and use the fact of his attraction in towards her to sort of balance it out. But yeah, she knows she needs that. And if she can keep it close and keep it under control, that it's going to be useful to her. Whether that's actually going to be the case, like I said, I think we'll get into that shortly.
All right, so next I want to get into the funeral scene. And I think it is clear from this funeral scene that Rhaenyra is really, sad and depressed over the loss of her daughter. And it's not, I mean, I think there was definitely that element of why do I have to deal with this childbirth shit right now when I should be dealing with war, but she's clearly affected by this death. And I think the funeral scene does show this, but then we get Eric showing up with the crown, and some keener eyes than I had pointed out in the previous episode when he was fleeing King's Landing with Rhaenys that he was carrying a little bag, which I did not notice, and apparently the bag had the crown that Viserys wore. And so gives it to her, and this just really got to me, this moment where he hands it to her, says, does the whole Kingsguard speech, I pledge my loyalty to you, kneels in front of her, gives her the crown, and Aemon crowns her, and everyone around her kneels, except for Rhaenys, because she's not decided yet, but everyone, and you can see, I love the way the actors play this, like without any words, you can see how this is the moment. It's real to her now. It's real to her that she's the queen. She's not the heir anymore, which is what she's been her entire life. She now has to step up and be the ruler. And the realization, I think, really came across. And yeah, this scene, I fucking, it got to me. Alyssa, start with your thoughts on this one.
Yeah, and let us not forget that she really hasn't properly gotten to mourn her father either. I mean, she was really close. I think she felt really closeness to her father, even if they didn't always seem close. But I think by the end that she did felt a dedication and honor to him. So she hasn't even had a chance to mourn for him, and now she's got a baby to mourn for, and then she's got to prepare for war. So there's a lot going on there, and so I think it really did uplift her spirits. It gave her strength for Eric to come in. It was a powerful scene. I wish it wasn't in the trailer, but where he, yeah. But we got more of the context here than we got in the trailer, where he kneels and says and proclaims her to be his queen, and then everyone else kneels. Yeah, it got me a little bit too, Mark. It definitely. And Emma Darcy is so good. I know people were really dreading Millie Alcock being off the show, but I'm sold on Emma Darcy. Throughout this episode, and we'll talk about that very end scene too. Like, her facial expressions, her face acting is phenomenal, and it was in this scene as well.
Yeah, I think we're 3 for 3 with the emotions on this. They carry it off beautifully, and I think in the after show they had discussed it perfectly. It was like, at her lowest moment, she's also lifted to her highest. She's in the midst of her father's dead. She hasn't been able to mourn. She's just lost a kid, and here's a guy that shows up and brings the Targaryen crown from King's Landing, from her father's head, for her. Look, I'm starting to get emotional just even talking about it right now. I mean, it was really a beautiful scene, and yeah, and especially everyone coming down. There wasn't a grumbling, there wasn't anything, and obviously we're at Dragonstone, and these are people that are supporting her anyway. But just from a visual standpoint, and so different from Aegon's, which was orchestrated and people shoved in and crowds forced into the thing to look at all of this. Look, we got a king and here it is. And here is a queen who is suffering, who is just bonding in with family, being lifted in that moment, and everyone around kind of being there because of her, there to support, and they're actually, uh, uh, you know, uh, pledging allegiance to and all of that, not simply because they've been forced by the city guards to be there. I think was a perfect dichotomy, a perfect difference of flavor, and yeah, it was very effective. And I love just Renice standing in the background, just like, okay, I haven't decided yet, but this is looking okay. I don't have a problem yet. I thought that was really, I love that little transition through the episode.
Yeah, and I love that you brought up the contrast between this and Aegon's coronation, because Aegon, it just reminded me so much of like a dictatorship, like a he like like he could just went well just went like this, like he's like, "Ah, yeah, power." Whereas Rhaenyra was very much more like she's just touched by this support and uplifted by the support. So it's two very different coronation scenes, and I found that very interesting.
Yeah, something is kind of tenuously related, but I wanted to bring it up now because why not? Is I think, yeah, I am 100% black, so I'm on the black side completely. And I've brought this up before as some people complaining that the show is being more biased towards Rhaenyra and the blacks. And I heard this opinion recently from a book scholar or someone who's familiar with the books. I don't know if I'd say a scholar, but saying that the books actually got people to side more with Alicent than the Greens. And I didn't get that from the books. I don't know. I didn't really agree with that opinion. I read World of Ice and Fire, and I was still side Rhaenyra. I still completely sided with Rhaenyra. And I'm just started, like first chapter through in Fire and Blood section of this story, and I don't really think it's presenting one side or the other. It seems pretty equal, so I actually disagree with that. But I think just naturally, would be more willing to side with Rhaenyra. As I say, even before I watched the show, just reading the story from World of Ice and Fire and videos I watched, I was on Rhaenyra's side just because the reason they don't give her the crown is because she's a woman. So that already pushes me away from the High Towers. I don't know if Alyssa, you had any thoughts on that.
I completely disagree with that interpretation of the book that it was leaning us more toward the Greens. No, I was more toward Team Rhaenyra reading the book as well. Here, I think it definitely is a little more pronounced in the show, but at the same time, they're doing their best to humanize some characters on the Green side. They did that last week with Alicent, and we'll talk about another character who gets humanized a little later on in the episode. So they are trying to humanize both sides of it and not make it too one-sided. So I just kind of ignore the complaints that this is too one-sided to Rhaenyra. Like, I mean, I've also heard the opposite complaint that, well, there's not really anyone to root for. So like you can't please everybody all the time. Like one way or the other, people are going to complain. But I was Team Rhaenyra, Team Black reading the book, and I think that the show is doing more making it more pronounced here, especially by one example is having that contrast in the coronations, as I said. But at the same time, they're humanizing some of the characters on the Green. You've got your Lara Strongs and your Otto Hightowers, but they are humanizing some of them to make it a little less, clear cut. Although I think most people are rooting for Team Black for sure.
Joseph in the chat says, I think the books lean black where the show is strongly black, and I think that's okay because it effectively tells the story.
I
Yeah.
agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
I'm
agree.
I'm like, why would it be any other way? I
Yeah.
mean, I mean, I get the idea that, which side is better than the other, but I think the show has clearly said it between the challenges they've had and the kids that come out of them. Uh, I think is a firm definer of this. If anything, by the end of this episode, they've definitely chosen a side on who's cool and who isn't cool.
That being said, knowing what's coming, the blacks aren't angels.
Oh no!
And
Oh no!
show's
War's
gonna
bad.
definitely get more into that. Anywho, yeah, let's talk about this first war council now. Bit afraid. I don't want to confuse it with the second one. I believe in the first one is when they light the map on fire, that cool map of Westeros,
Yeah.
and they put
My
a body.
God, that table is freaking awesome.
I
Oh my
love
God,
that
I want
so
one.
much.
I want one so bad. Oh.
I heard, I forget who it was, some video I watched or something. I heard the opinion that, man, Stannis really ruined that table.
Yes,
It's like,
I saw that
it's
same
just a
thing, yeah.
boring painted table. Like, where's all the flame underneath it? It doesn't light up. What does
Never
Stannis
seen
doing?
that. The depth of the oh.
That table was so cool. Like, yeah, and I love it with the little chess pieces. Like, okay, we're gonna take Winterfell here. This was so awesome.
Yeah, look, every D&D player was like, "Oh, I need that for the play gaming table." Yes, that's
So they did something which really pissed me off that Game of Thrones season 7 and 8 didn't do, particularly 7, I think, when Daenerys and Cersei were having their war. They laid out the whole situation. Like, this family goes with here and this family goes with there. Like, that's what I want. And I haven't heard anyone complain that this is too much exposition. I don't think it is. I think we need this. We need to have, the Lannisters are clearly on the green side. We can't do anything about that. But maybe we could get the Starks. Maybe we can get the Aarons, and maybe we could get the Baratheons. And they go to some of the other minor houses. Maybe we can get them. And so I like that. I think we absolutely needed that. And I did like how they said, we only have this number of men. So they clearly have less men than the Greens do. It's like, we can't take King's Landing with this men. But we can defend Dragonstone. Now, was it this council or the next one when they talked about the dragons?
It's here as part of that conversation. We don't have enough men, but Damon's like, "Oh yeah, but we've got more dragons." So that's where that came in.
Yeah, wasn't it like some random guy who pointed out, but the dragon thing is like, we have tons of dragons. Why don't we use the dragons?
Yeah, I don't remember, but I remember Damon kind of talking about it, but maybe it was started by the random guy. I don't remember.
Yeah. But I think there wasn't. Yeah, and Rhaenyra's response is like, "We got a King's Landing and use dragons. We're not gonna have. There's gonna be nothing left. I'm gonna rule over ash and bone," is what she said, and I get callbacks to the whole Daenerys thing.
God, yeah.
She should have just fucking killed Cersei with their dragon. But anyway, not the same situation here. Here, there's actually dragons on the opposing side, so I actually get her point here. I think that makes sense. Anyway, Darrin, let's start with you on this one.
I'm going to say yes on the exposition, and even more so if they had done half of it with just an overhead shot of the table and moving the pieces so I could see really where everything was in relationship and get that map down in my mind. I would have eaten that up. That would have been awesome. So yeah, that's where my nerdiness leans towards. But yeah, and I really did like, because again, we're starting to see how Rhaenyra really is seeing her rule as she's there to protect the realm, not to put her butt in the chair. And I think even through this, she's asking, like, what is the best way? Would this work if I gave up the throne? I mean, there's a lot of great conversations that I think come out through this, and especially the idea of I don't want to rule over. If we let loose dragons, everything burns. there was responsibility in her action. And again, we'll play the song. This definitely is what ends up bringing Rhaenys over. But it's a nice difference from the way everybody else is doing it, from the way everybody else is looking. Hightower and over in the Greens are all looking for quick position and advantage, and how can we do things. Daemon just wants to go to war. Their team's like, we need to fight back and we need to get this. It's all fighting. And she's like, okay, we need to step back and see what our plan is and who's around, who's on our side, and how does this table even lay out with all of the pieces so we can get a good look at what we're actually deciding on doing. Is a really smart bit. And I love that if they can maintain that from Rhaenyra's character as countering all of the expectations of everyone around her, I think she can really find a different way to run this war, and I'd be really interested to see how that plays out.
Yeah, I do think we're kind of getting the start of that here. We don't until the bridge scene. She's not really going full into the. But you make a good point. I think this is where she's starting to think about. Okay, let's think about how we're going to do this. Is this really going to work? Is this worthwhile? Now, as far getting back to the comments on the exposition, that is exactly what I was complaining about at the beginning of this video, talking about episode 9, that we did not get in that episode that we needed. What we got was Tywin Lannister saying, well, if we go to the Baratheons and propose marriage, and then it gets cut off. And then I was like, no, finish the sentence. We need more on that, because I know that that's coming. I know that is their strategy, to send Aemon over to propose one of Loras Baratheon's daughters, and they don't talk about it there. Here, they do get into the nitty gritty of, okay, if we get the Starks, this is what we'll put. And Daemon, I don't remember if it was this War Council, the next one, it was like, yeah, the Starks are fine, but what we really need is the Riverlands. We really need the Tullys. We really need the Arryns. That stuff, we needed that. So all of that was really good. And when they get into the dragons, and here's where Rhaenyra is like, yeah, I don't know, is this going to work? Because a lot of the dragons are riderless. So a lot of them are young. We have more, but they've got the older and bigger ones for the most part. And I want to talk Mav11 in the chat. So who rides Vermithor, or are they more so unleashing him for chaos? If Daemon is rider intimate, will 3 roasting giants that may not have riders but will react to anything attacking Daemon? Well, then he goes on. But as for I can't pronounce that name. Verfanor. He's Verfanor. It's the dragon that he goes and gets later on in the episode, which is the dragon of the old king Jaehaerys, and does not have a rider anymore. But I don't think they're just trying to unleash him from chaos. I heard that somebody translated that Valyrian that he's saying, and one of the things he says in Valyrian is, you will have a rider soon. So he's just trying to approach that dragon, get him primed for getting him a rider on their side. But Daemon he's very much in favor of the dragon strategy. But I found it very interesting and kind of funny. He starts listing up all the dragons that he has, and he says Meleys, which is Rhaenys' dragon. And Rhaenys, if you look at her, like, cocks her head back, what? Who said you had my dragon? I never said you had my dragon. Also, he's listing off Steve Smoke. They used to be laying there. He's making some presumptions that Rhaenys is like, I never said you could have those dragons. So I found that kind of funny as well. But again, it shows Daemon is just kind of really gung-ho for war, and he's really kind of getting ahead of himself, whereas Rhaenyra is showing a little bit more restraint, which is what Rhaenys points out later on in the episode. She's a little more level-headed. She's a little more like, okay, let's stop and think this through. Where Daemon's like, no, we got dragons, let's go. So again, showing kind of their contrasting styles.
No, absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, let's follow that on to the next scene with on the bridge where Otto Hightower comes to treat with them, and I love how this is a callback to the whole episode 2 bridge confrontation, and it was just like that episode. Rhaenyra flies on their dragon, flies behind the Hightower party, gets off her dragon, walks through the Hightower party, which is a lot of goal doing that. Showing a lot of goal. Not that they would like kill her right there and there. Very unlikely anyway. But anyway, walks through them and has that sort of intimidation factor, definitely having, because they're stuck between Daemon and his fighters and a dragon on the other side. But hears him out, and Otto Hightower makes his plea, which, as we heard from the previous episode, was Alicent's idea. His idea would have been to send an assassin to kill her in the night. but saying, look, like, you swear fealty to Aegon II, and you can be, Lord of Dragonstone. Your sons can be Lord of the Driftmark. Your other sons can hold place in High Court. You can all have seats in the council. You all have high standing. And all this great thing will still be great, and everyone will live happily ever after. And of course, Daemon's response was like, I'd rather feed my sons to the dragon than have them bear cups for your bastard children or for your usurper children, or whatever he said. And he's like, he escalates, he draws his sword, and he like tells everyone to attack. He's like, the dragon's gonna push you down, but Rhaenyra's like, wait. Cool your jets, calm down here. And tells Otto, look, I'll actually I'll consider this. And you can see the shock on Daemon. What, you're actually going to consider this shit? But I think it was very smart of her, and as we see in the next scene, she's not necessarily ready to kneel to King Aegon, but she doesn't want to jump the gun. She wants to consider her options. And I kind of glossed over the whole thing with Otto pulling out the page of the book that she had ripped out in episode 1, I believe, and gave to Alicent, and Alicent gave that as a reminder of their friendship, which I think might have played a part, like that emotional connection. Like, this is the same girl I used to be friends with. Maybe I shouldn't automatically jump to wanting to kill her and her entire family. so yeah, that actually surprised me and was a huge change from the books. And I was just reading this part of the book, and in the book she's straight out, let's kill the fucking Hightower. Like, straight out, those usurpers will get them. And I think this is better, actually. I think it portrays a more dynamic character who's able to look at things differently, and it's going to be more of a character progression, which we'll get to at the end of the episode, which I like. It's more of a dynamic storytelling. Alyssa, we'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I really love how the show has done that. They've really kind of made her a little more introspective, think things through a little bit. In the book, like I said, Otto Hightower isn't there, but Grand Maester Orwell is the lead person there, and she says to Grand Maester Orwell, so remind me again, who did my father name as heir? And he's like, well, you. And she said, oh, okay, so then why are you betraying me and becoming and supporting this usurper when clearly I'm the heir? And she's just straight on like, yeah, fuck them all. We are going to war. Whereas I think this works a lot better. I think, and ultimately it does like sway Rhaenys, where she tells Corlys, and I know we'll get to that scene later, but she tells Corlys, hey, she's the only one out of all of them who is showing even a little bit restraint and thinking this through. And Rhaenys is impressed by this. And I am too. Like, I think this is a very positive character trait for her that is not in the book. And I think that it does make her a more interesting character, a little more complex, and a little more relatable, which makes you all the more want to be on Team Black. But you bring up the page, and yeah, I do think that, I mean, you if it was anyone else, I would say it was a manipulation tactic. If it was Alicent from the book, I would say it was a manipulation tactic. But I can see from the last episode, she was really trying to do this peacefully. She wanted to try to generally appeal to their friendship. And I do think it gave Rhaenyra a pause. Like, I don't think she saw that page and started crying and was like, "Oh, okay, I'll bend the knee." But obviously, but I think that it did contribute to giving her a little bit of a pause. Let's think this through. I think it was a good move on bringing the page. But before we move on to Darrin, I actually wanted to backtrack. I also wanted to talk about the parallels between this and episode 2, where Rhaenyra comes in with the dragon, but this time she's on Damon's side instead of Otto's side, as she was in the first scenes. I loved how they kind of did a little twist on that scene. So I just want to mention that too.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going with it, because before she was like, her dragon lands and backs up her people, and now her dragon lands and pinches them between two forces, and then walks right through them like, well, obviously you're not going to bother me with fire breath hanging right over you unless you just want to die, which I thought was just kind of an awesome bit. We're seeing the aggression with Damon. I mean, you two have both hit I think all of the high points on this. But it is, I think, the nice part of Rhaenyra seeing things a little bit differently. And I mean, obviously I haven't read the book, so I don't know what the differences are that they have made, but I would say that her having this kind of more measured response gives her a larger difference to any of the other characters. And so I think that that's the best reason to do it. If she was just like, yeah, you're right, kill those high towers, those traitorous bastards, she would be reacting the exact way that everybody else is. There would be no difference. There would be no variation on this. And then it's just two warring sides. This, at least, we see motivational differences between grabbing for power, protecting family, trying to protect the realm, also protecting family. How do we parse this all out? So I think this was a great setup, and then obviously leads to some of our confrontation on differences between her and her consort.
Which we'll get into now. So
Yeah.
let's get into that the scene where Damon and Rhaenyra sort of talked this over, and Rhaenyra's like, it's my job to keep the realm together. I don't, my father really wanted me to hold it in peace, and if we start a war, this is gonna cause a lot of death, and this is exactly what he didn't want. And he's just like, oh well, that's your father talking. And she's like, my father's dead. Like, this is me talking. And then brings up the prophecy of ice and fire. Now, I've actually come around to appreciate this inclusion in the show. When they introduced it in episode 1, I'm like, season 8, don't remind me of this shit. But now it's like, it makes sense. Like, it gives her a reason to not want to cause conflict, to not want to cause war, to be like, it's important for the coming conflict, which she doesn't realize is not coming for another 200 years. But anyway, it's important to keep things, peaceful, and not to tear the kingdom apart. So if we are going to tear the kingdom apart, we got to be sure we can handle it if it's for a reason. So I don't know if it's worth it. And then it's funny, as soon as she brings up the prophecy, Damon chokes her. Now, and Damon, from his perspective, he's like, from his perspective, he had to hear this shit from his brother all the time. It's like, oh, this is bullshit. I don't want to hear about this. This doesn't matter. You're just doing your prophecies and crazy shit. And I love Rhaenyra's reaction after he lets go of hers. And it's not like, how dare you touch me, or you're killed, or you should have cut off your hand, or anything like that. It's just like, he never told you, did he? Which, god damn, that was powerful. Now, I do have to mention, for me, the controversy that I heard going around, a lot of people unhappy with. They were unhappy with this scene of, grabbing his wife and choking her. But again, and I've heard a lot of other reviewers and YouTubers respond to this, and I agree with them. Like, do you not know who Damon is? Like, this is totally in Damon's character. And as Alyssa mentioned in the chat earlier on, he killed his last wife. So choking his current one is not exactly out of character for him. I think there's been a lot of sort of people like loving Damon's putting him up as a hero. It's like, oh, Damon's so great. And even people involved with the show is like, why are you guys doing that? Like, you know, like this is not really a good guy. And so for me, it was disturbing to see, of course, but I think Rhaenyra's reaction of not letting it anger her, goad her, was kind of the best reaction to show that she had the power in that moment. But I think it was totally within Damon's character. I mean, he beat the shit out of this guy just for bringing a message from his brother saying that he's going to help him. Like the fact that Rhaenyra was like talking about making peace and stuff that he doesn't want to go to. Yeah, I think it's totally in his character to do something shitty like this because he's a shitty guy. Anyway, Darrin, let's start with you on this one.
Wait, you're saying the guy named Demon is bad? Yeah. No, this is, yeah. I mean, it is an interesting bit, and it shows kind of the favoritism that Rhaenyra had in her father's eyes, certainly versus Daemon in regards to being a successor, because she kind of told Rhaenyra, like, immediately, like, I'm choosing you. You're the one I should have. Let's get into this big thing of what's going on and what this history is. That was kind of all about it. I am appreciating the use of the history more because I was in the exact same boat of like, oh, come on, you guys are leaning way too much on your previous show. You've got to let this stand for itself. But the fact that they're actually using it as a character motivator for Rhaenyra, then it's okay. It's like if she is basing a lot of her decisions on maintaining this and this belief of this thing and maintaining this vision that her father had passed on to her, that this is an important thing to do, that's a total reason to have this around. And as long as it continues to have that particular play, I am great with it. Seeing that it's doing something, you're right. I'm much more fine with it than if they had just been throwing it out there like, hey, remember that Song of Ice and Fire with our Game of Thrones we're playing here? You know, as long as they don't do that, then I'm good. Yeah, the Daemon grabbing against Rhaenyra, I think that was a little much. It is perfectly in character. Again, this is who he is. And he's trying to physically impose his will upon his wife. But you're right, her not responding that way, throwing back the, oh, you didn't know, you don't get it, you don't even know what it is that we're fighting for here, keeps her up above him, keeps her in the spot that she needs to be. And I think that that's going to end up being, I'm curious how their relationship is really going to parse off, because I don't think Daemon wants to hurt her the way that he didn't care about hurting the previous women in his life. But he's used to using his strength and position to impose his will. How, what lines is he going to go up against? And I think now if it's just kind of like, I'm going to scare you, but not really do anything, that's, I'm good with that. And the fact that she can push off and be like you said, not even going, you bastard, but like, oh, you don't even know what you're doing. Ha, be gone with you. Go find a dragon somewhere. Which he does. Alyssa?
Yeah, I don't think Daemon would ever actually really hurt her or kill her, and she knows that. If there's one thing that we have seen that's one of his more positive qualities is his loyalty to family, and she's his family twofold. And she's the wife he chose rather than the one he murdered that he was arranged to marry. So I think she knew that ultimately he would never really hurt her. So that she used that against him, and she used that to take control of the situation and take the power and go, you don't even know about the prophecy, do you? And yeah, as far as him doing that at all, choking her, yeah, which I think it was good to remind the audience, hey, this is not a good guy. Stop rooting for him. He murdered his wife. He's not a great guy. Let's remember that. And not to spoil things, but I think this is going to continue. And they should continue to remind us who this guy is. He's not a good guy. I do think ultimately Rhaenyra as a person that he wouldn't kill, he wouldn't harm. Yeah, in that way, I think it was really more of a power play. I am the one in control here, and she took that away from him, and she ended up taking the power in that situation. So this whole scene really works for me.
Now, getting more with sympathy for the Greens is one of the points that Otto Hightower has. Is actually a good point. Is that one of the reasons why he didn't want Rhaenyra to be queen? I think this might have been from the books, not the show, but where he says if Rhaenyra is queen, then really Daemon's going to be the ruler, and we can't have a fucking cruel ruler like this. It would be terrible. It'd be like Maegor the Cruel. I don't know if he brought that up in the show, but. I just read
he brought up the Maegor the Cruel comparison in the show back in the first episode.
Oh yes, yeah.
Of whenever it was when they were discussing the succession. I guess that was the end of the first episode.
Yeah, first episode.
Where Daemon would have been the next in the line of succession, and Otto Hightower said, well, he would be like Maegor the Cruel. So he may have brought that up later in the book, but he didn't in the show. No, that would have been back in the beginning of the season.
But I think that's still, even though they didn't say it's still implied. Like that's still a point that they have, that Daemon is not a good guy, and that maybe that's part of what they have on their side is that we got to keep him away from the throne.
Yeah. Aegon's a much better choice.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, Aegon, to be fair, is a puppet.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Where Daemon wouldn't be. Yeah.
I don't know. Joffrey seemed to have gotten used to his realm, so I don't really trust any of those guys. Like, the fact that the status, the position will calm their eccentricities. Thank you. I can get that word out. I think we have proven to be not working.
Well, that was a point I was going to bring up last week, which I forgot, was that I feel like Aegon is clearly not as bad as Joffrey. Like, he's not a great guy. He fathered a lot of bastard children who are now in like fighting pits and shit. But he's not like bloodthirsty and wanting to kill everyone. He doesn't even want to be king. Where Joffrey's like, fuck yeah, I want to be king so I can torture the shit out of people. So he's definitely not as bad as Joffrey.
The guy who's fathering bastard demon pit fighting children. Not as bad as Joffrey, really says something about Joffrey.
Oh my god, Joffrey is the fucking worst. But anyway.
No,
except for maybe Ramsay.
Ramsay is the worst.
Yeah, Ramsay. But he was never king of the Seven Kingdoms.
Yeah.
But anywho, so let's move over to the Corlys returns, and we get a very interesting scene with him and Rhaenys where he's just like, apologizing for almost getting killed off in the Stepstones, and she's like, yeah, why the fuck are you abandoning me when I need you the most? You just want to go off and fight your wars. And she tells him about his brother dying, and he's like, I like how he wasn't like, oh, pissed off or upset. He's like, yeah, he was a bit ambitious. Exactly. and he understood that. And but he was like, yeah, we don't want to side with Rhaenyra because she killed our son. Like, fuck that. We don't need to side with anyone. Let's just go to Driftmark, do our thing. We don't need to be with anyone. And it's actually really interesting and powerful that Rhaenys is the one that pulls them in. Rhaenys is the one to be like, well, that our grandsons are never going to be safe. And they're, as long as Aegon's king, and this is just going to fuck everything up. So we can't just run and hide and pretend like everything's going to be okay. But moreover, as we talked about already, she brings up the point of Rhaenyra is actually proving herself. She's actually been impressed with the way Rhaenyra has conducted herself as queen. She's the only one who's not hot-headed, the only one who was being reasonable and taking things into account and saying, and sort of convinces him to back her. And so then we get the second War Council scene where he comes up and is like full on. Like when he first, they were like, oh, well, it depends if we have the help of the Valerians or not. And he was like, yes, you have our help. We fully support you. And more good news, we totally fucking won our war in the Stepstones and we control the whole narrow sea, all the trade there. So we can block out, we can do a blockade, strangle the fuck out of King's Landing, make sure they don't get any supplies by sea. And that's like a huge boost to them. And it was felt like a moment. And you can see when Corlys first walked in and he wasn't declared for anyone, how he looked over at his granddaughters who were like uncertain, who kind of like, aren't you going to support us? And he does. He pulls through, and they decide to send their letters to the other, form their alliances, so things are starting to form. But I still like Rhaenyra's tactic here is still like, she's still considering Otto's offer, but she wants to see what we can do. Let's see if we can build an alliance. Let's see if we can be a match to him. Let's put out feelers and see how things go. And then we have, which we'll get into later, of course, more, but Jay speaking up and being like, instead of sending ravens, why don't you send us on Dragonback? Is more convincing. So yeah, things are starting to come together, and so I thought it was a really exciting scene. Let's start with you on this one.
Yeah, so as far as the Rhaenys and Corlys interaction, I have loved these interactions all season long. Whenever the two of them have a little heart-to-heart, I always love these conversations. And I love Rhaenys so much. I'm glad that we're getting more of her toward the end of the season. I felt like she was a little underused in the beginning of the season, and I love that we're seeing more of her and just seeing once again just how she just cuts through the bullshit, cuts straight to the point, and she's like, yeah, you abandoned me. Why did you abandon me? And I love the line at one point where he says, I lost everything, and she says, we lost everything, Corlys. And I love how she just puts him in his place. And he does admit his faults. He admits that he apologized. I don't know if he flat out apologized, but he admits his fault. And when he says, that my brother was a bit ambitious, and so am I. And he kind of admits what he did wrong and says, you know what? Let's just go off together the Driftmark and forget this whole thing. But absolutely love that Rhaenys is the one who reined him in and who has been watching Rhaenyra and who has been impressed. And that's, again, it ties into how they've changed Rhaenyra's character to make her a little more level-headed, to make her stop and think about things, and that impresses Rhaenys. So that's the right way to be, because that ultimately brings Corlys in. And now when they go down into the council, and mind you, I've read the book. I know Corlys is going to be on their side, but when he goes up and announces his commitment to the queen, I was like, yes. It was just a fist pumping scene. It was just so. I think I was clapping. I was definitely clapping. I was like, yes. It was such a great scene. Then. Yeah, he starts explaining, we've got the narrow sea, we can just strangle King's Landing by sea. And Rhaenys says, yeah, I'll get on my dragon and I'll go scout that area. Love it. I love it. And then things have really shifted. And I think this is what ultimately convinces Rhaenyra to, okay, let's give this a try. Without the Valerians, I think she would have probably chosen to bend the knee, but I think this is what turns the tables, for better or worse. We'll see how things go moving forward. But if she goes and bends the knee to Aegon, it's end of show. There's nothing to have a show about. So this needed to happen, and it was so glorious. It was such a great moment in the show.
Yeah, otherwise the Dance of Dragons would be like a wedding dance. It's that's it. It's a small thing. It happened in an afternoon, and we just sort of blew it up in storybook. No, this was nice. Brandon's mentioning in the chat that they are a great couple, Corliss and Renice, and I completely agree. They look great. I love their interaction together. I love this build up. I love the humility that Corliss runs into, and then the support that Rhaenyra throws out. I actually enjoyed in the council scene when he looks up and sees that his daughters have positioned themselves next to the Rhaenyra's boys that
Luke and Jace.
the Luke and Jace that they're betrothed to, very much in a supportive type thing, like, no, we're here with this and we're backing. And it was just some of that small body language and support before Corliss officially like throws his support behind. I thought that was just really lovely. It's really like, no, we're all here, we all support, we all think this is the great doing, without having to have the additional dialogue for that. You just got to see that. And I think it really it told its story very well with that. And yeah, this is definitely okay, we've got it together, so now we can actually see if this is going to happen. And you're right, before this, maybe even at this point, there might have been the weighing of, am I going to take Otto's offer? But much like we've had the close calls that have to get resorted, even when the king died, it was, are we going to get these two families close and they're going to avoid this war? No, it's going to happen, and then it's not. And we have that same kind of instance happening here. Is like, are we going to get our support? Are we going to find a thing? Are we going to see where things are? And if we have to go to war, let's take that moment. And then, of course, events occur that will definitely make sure that this war is going to happen. And I think this was kind of that perfect little segue to it. And this was, I think, right about the point where I was like, might have been the one right after when they're like, okay, mother, we're going to get ready and dried off. Then like, oh, one of you's dead. Which one is it going to be?
This is the point when you got it. Okay. Right. So let's quickly get into the scene where Daemon is kind of trying to tame the dragon. What was the dragon's name again?
Vermithor?
Vermithor? Yeah.
Something like that.
Which I believe they said was the second largest dragon.
It is.
Yes.
It's the second oldest and second largest to Vhagar.
A huge benefit to them, and I didn't know what Alyssa said earlier about how apparently he was saying in Targaryen, we will find a writer for you. I didn't think they were intending for Daemon to be the writer. I took that as he was trying to tame the dragon so that eventually they could.
He can't be. You can only have one. You can only be bonded with one dragon at a time.
Yeah,
and he already has one.
Some people were thinking that the show was kind of trying to change that and have him have two dragons.
No, that's not what he was doing.
Yeah, I know, but some people thought that.
Yeah,
they're wrong.
Those people are wrong. No, he was trying to. Whether or not that's true, that's just something I heard that he said in Valyrian that we'll find another writer for you. That tracks with me. I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah.
It sounds like something he would say because he was definitely not trying to write him himself. He can't. He was trying to tame him to get him ready for another writer.
Yeah, this is something I wouldn't think the show would change that drastic because I think some people, well, the show's changing the books. Maybe they're going to change it. No, I don't think they would go that far.
No, they can't change like the basic fundamental rules of how the universe works. Unless you're Game of Thrones season 8, but here,
exactly.
Or J.J. Abrams.
Yeah,
it wouldn't be a good idea, but they could.
Yeah, but they have a track record of so far in the show of not doing anything that.
I agree. I had more faith in them that they would not make such a drastic change. It just makes more sense. I think they're going to go the same way in the book, which, if I'm being honest, I don't remember because I haven't gotten that point in Fire and Blood yet, and Ice and Fire just throws so many fucking names at you so fast it's hard to remember who was writing who and what was going on. But anyway, regardless, I'm sure they'll stick with what happened in the books. But anyway. I don't know if you had any more to say about the scene, Darren. We'll start with you.
No, I just thought again it was cool. We've seen Damon collecting eggs and doing things. He's like going to be like the dragon godfather. You need a dragon? I've got all the dragons. Come to
He's
me.
the dragon whisperer.
The dragon whisperer. Yes. Okay. Better one. So, I mean, to me, this is totally in line. And the minute that I saw, I was like, oh, is this the dragon that they were talking about from the previous king that flew off and didn't have? So, yeah, totally made sense. I got very excited about that. So, yeah, and if Damon's going to be able to do anything, it's going to be able to get dragons, which is something that I don't think the Greens even have the capacity to get to, since most of them are out here or further afar. So, yeah, I'm kind of excited about that and how that's going to play out. Yeah, I don't know what the writers or any of that. I'm just excited to see that we're going to have more and bigger dragons, because you're never going to go wrong with more and bigger dragons. Just ask young Jace. Luke. Wish he had said. Yeah, anyway, go on. Yes.
Yeah, so yeah, I don't really have much to add either, but I do think it was cool that we got to see Damon do this and do see him as the dragon whisperer. And he does not have a plan for who's going to ride the dragons. He's like, well, we'll work that out. We'll figure that out later. First, let's get the dragons. Let's get them on our side. Let me go and sing these little chants to them in Valyrian, and let's get them primed so when we have a rider for them, like, they'll be on our side. So yeah, I think he's preparing. I don't think he has a plan yet who the writers are going to be, but he's thinking ahead. He's planning ahead to make sure that they have the dragons secured on their side.
Yeah, it's actually interesting that I think this is his way of planning for war. Like, he's actually leaving the politicking to Rhaenyra, but like, he already signified a very important way of huge asset they have is dragons, and they need to utilize this asset. So this is his way of preparing. Cool. All right. So then we get the scene with the boys being sent off on their various missions, and they make them swear on the Bible, or whatever they call the 7-pointed star book, or whatever the fuck that is. And they make them swear on it that you will not fight. No fighting! Which is, of course, where I get my screen name for this episode. A messenger. You are a messenger, not a warrior. Don't get in any fights. And really, I think the mistake here is Rhaenyra's, because, and this is something the extra material gets into more. They're saying that, Jace, you're the older one. You're going to go on the longer journey up to the Vale and to Winterfell, because who knows how you'll be received there. Maybe you'll be received warmly. I don't know. But the more experience is more dangerous. We'll send you there. Luke, you're the younger one. You just go to this closer castle right nearby us. The Baratheons are friends. They're all good with us. Everything will be fine. Just go there. And, oh, God, it's just so heartbreaking, especially like watching the scene, of course, knowing what's going on. And it was kind of hard to get through, knowing what was going to happen. I don't know if we want to talk about this real quick. Alyssa, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so I knew we were going to focus on Luke. I was slightly disappointed we won't meet Kragon Stark until season 2, but I knew that was going to be the case. I'm really curious to see what the show does with him. I hope they make him kind of a bigger character than he is in the books. Yes. Kragon Stark, of course, is the son of the Stark that we saw back in episode 1, who is swearing fealty to Rhaenyra. So that's one of their things. We're like, well, his dad swore an oath, so we're pretty sure the Starks are they're pretty good about keeping oaths. But we just want to go make sure, because it wasn't.
They did mention this in the show, right? They did bring up the fact that the Starks are.
Yeah,
that's something we know from Game of Thrones.
No, they said that. They said that explicitly in this episode. They said that the Starks are kind of known for keeping their oaths, but this is a different guy, so let's just go double check. This isn't the same guy who actually gave the oath. This is his son. Rhaenyra says later, yeah, he's closer in age to you than he is to me, which honestly, they aren't that far off in age, Rhaenyra and Jace, but yeah. So that would be something to look forward to in season 2 to see, to meet Craig and Stark and get the Starks back into our world again. That'll be really fun. But I know we weren't going to see that now. We've got to focus in on Luke going off the Storm's End, and yeah, it's so ironic that it's like, oh yeah, you get the easy one. It's like, oh no, he's getting the hard
one. It was a like I said, just flying off. I was like, oh, this kid's doomed. I didn't know that Aemon was going to be there. Wasn't know how it was going to happen, but it was just like one of those separations. Like, all right, I'll be right back. Like, oh, no, you are not. You are not going to be right back.
So, did you know which one was doomed, though?
I think I noticed that it was Luke because, again, he's the one that flew off on the gray one into the cloud, and the symbolism was all just like, it's like flying into your death right there. That's definitely a doom trip going on right there. Beautiful shot, though, when he lands and looks over, and there's this massive dragon in like the next courtyard over. Like, okay, that's not good. We get a size difference too between the two of them. Was just shocking and beautifully done. And hats off to this young actor, really pulling off the I'm nervous, I'm scared, I shouldn't be here, I'm gonna try and do my duty. And I really love the kind of back and forth. I mean, Aemon is just, I mean, okay, the guy has a grudge. Understandably, he's got a grudge. He forgets the fact that he was about to bash like the rock into somebody's brain or something, So again, not a great kid, not the forgiving type. I did appreciate the Baratheon was like, look, he's under my protection here. You can't do any of this stuff. He's delivering a message, and under all that safety stuff, it's all good, which did play out. Because it happened outside of the castle.
So, Darrin, you're jumping a bit ahead to the next scene. But we'll go ahead and get into that now. Him arriving at, yes, and I agree. The contrast between and I think, I also agree that the actor played this very well. Like, I think one of the most impressive things about the show is how much it got me to care about these kids' characters, because that's something I was worried about, because they weren't introduced until episode 6, halfway through the season. And then someone pointed out, we've only seen versions of Jacaerys and Lucerys for 2 episodes. This is only the second episode we've seen these particular actors. And it's amazing how much I actually do care about them. And some of that has to do with the dead meat scenes we got earlier in this episode. But I think it was done well. And so I really feel his fear when he enters that hall and sees Aemon there, and how he's like, look, I'm sitting here for a reason. I gotta do what I gotta do. Now, I heard someone point out that maybe he would have been smarter if he just, as soon as he saw that other dragon, just turned right around, got on his dragon, and fucked off. Maybe he'd still be alive if he still did that. But no, he's like, tried to use his bravery and his strength. I was like, I can't fail my mother. And ironically, I think maybe that's what she would have wanted him to do. Like, she had no idea fucking Vhagar was going to be there. But yes, they completely underestimated the Baratheons, and I heard, yes, there was some material saying that, and I think it's true for the show, even though they didn't get into detail about this, that she was friends with Boris's father, the Baratheon we saw earlier, where she was doing the speed dating thing with the suitors. That they were like, and he's directly related to Rhaenys, and so he's part of the family, and so she kind of falsely, and so you brought up earlier the Starks. I was like, oh, we knew this one Stark guy, but we don't know his son. But she should have taken that same position with the Baratheons, but she didn't. She just assumed that they'd be all cool. But this guy, apparently totally different from his father, and it was like, well, I want fucking gifts. You bring me shit. You just reminding me of my obligation. What the fuck is up with that? he's offering to marry one of my daughters, and I got strong Walder Frey vibes from that one. But he was like, not in my hall. Like when Aemon flat out was like, I cut out your eye. Give me an eye. He's like, no, I think I'll pass on that one. but when Aemon was going to force the issue, he stepped up and was like, no, bullshit. Like, he's a messenger. He's doing the guest rights. Take it outside. Now, and some people are bringing out this thing in the book, which actually I don't think I've gotten to this part in the book. But it's from what I heard that one of Boris's daughters kind of taunts Aemon after Luke leaves, and like, what, did he take one of your balls as well as one of your eyes? And that kind of shames him to go after Luke. I'm kind of glad they left that out. I think I like it better without it. I think it's better that him going after Luke was his idea and he wasn't like kind of taunted into it.
No, because he plays off much more of a bully this way. Not even so much that I don't even think he necessarily expected him to be like, oh, okay, let me grab that knife and just take this all out there for you. I think he's just being a dick. And that's sort of what his position, and it gets, carried away, I suppose. But sorry, you were saying.
Yeah, Alyssa, your thoughts.
I love this scene so much. I love this from beginning to end. It was so good. From the moment Luke arrives and he sees Vhagar kind of just come up over the castle, this huge dragon. You see him like take a step and like, okay, and then it gathers himself. It's like, okay, I got to do this. My mom is counting on me. I'm going to do this, and then continues to walk on into the castle. It was so good, and all throughout the interaction, he sees Aemon there. He already knew he was there because he saw Vhagar, but you can tell he's nervous. But you can almost hear his inner dialogue, like, I can't let my mom down. I've got to do this for my mother. I've got to do this for the queen. I'm going to do this, and he stays pretty strong. But what I really love about this is Boris Baratheon. Even if you've never read the book, do you not love the casting of Boris Baratheon? He's got very strong Robert vibes. Not as fat, not as jolly, but you can tell that they're related. You can tell that this is Robert's ancestor. I love this casting so much. And he can't read. He's like, where the fuck's my maester when I need him? Like, so good.
But Alyssa, I've learned from Star Trek Picard that your ancestors look exactly like you.
Yeah, different show. Different. That's not just Star Trek Picard. That's the whole Star Trek universe. But no. No, I love that they got a guy who was. You could definitely tell he's related to Robert, but he's a different guy. So I love it so much. And I got to read a line from the book because they not stole, but they took lines straight from the book that I just was like, ugh. So he says, I'm reading from the book, go home, pup. Tell that bitch of your mother that the Lord of Storms Inn is not a dog she can whistle up at need to set against her foes. That's straight from the book. And he says it in the show, and this actor delivered it. And I was like, this is so good. This is so good. Like, I love that Baratheon vibe. Now, as far as the Aemon confrontation, so this is an interesting, not change, but in the book, we do also get Aemon's perspective first, where he gets there first. He offers to marry one of the daughters, and there's some interactions there. I like this being from Luke's perspective because this is the Blacks episode. This is the Black Queen episode. We had the Greens episode last week. So this is all from Luke's perspective. And that would also be why we wouldn't get the daughter goading Aemon. And I also agreed. When I was watching this, I was like, hopefully they'll cut that out. I don't think that belongs here. So I think that was a good choice, that it gives Aemon a little more agency. Like, he's doing it on his own. He's not doing it just because he feels, emasculated by some girl talking to him. Those girls they were just kind of background in this show. They were just like, yeah, he's gonna marry one of them. I like this approach better. I think this really worked well, especially in an episode called The Black Queen, where we're looking from the Black's perspective. We're looking from Luke's perspective. So I love the choices that they made here. And I love that he takes off his eye patch and he has that sapphire eye. That is something that he has in the books. And I've heard people complain earlier, what, he has an eye patch? Where's his sapphire eye? Oh, it's under the eye patch. And it's just so creepy. And you can just feel how intimidated Luke is. Or he's just like, I want you to cut out an eye too. Like it is, you can just feel for Luke. You can feel how he's feeling, just so scared and intimidated. But he's just trying to stay strong for his mother. This scene was so good. I loved it.
Trying to stay strong for his mother.
Yeah, I feel like I can never say the word strong anymore because.
Well, and you brought this up, Mark. I love the point where Baratheon is like, what, you've brought nothing to negotiate? You brought no offerings and no gifts? It's really showing of like, man, Rhaenyra, you're not really prepared for this. You don't know how this is all done. You gotta be maneuvering better for all of this. Which I think will probably be something that will be shifted by next season.
I think it was more of she misjudged him because she knew that the Tully, I believe it's Grover Tully. Apparently, the Tullys are named after Sesame Street characters.
We need all these Sesame Street character Tullys coming. Yes, yeah.
When we meet Snuffleupagus,
So, but no, she knew that the Tullys, or she was a bit iffy on the Starks. Like she knew that the Tullys would be hard, and was like, oh, they're going to want something. They're not just going to ally with us. We got to give them something. We got to show something. But she just misjudged the Baratheons.
Sure.
She was basing it off of this guy's father, who apparently was very different than him. And that I do like. It just shows a misjudgment call on her part.
Yeah. Well, no, again, it's like there's the games aren't being played at the same level at the moment, on either end. It's like there's some's better and some are worse. Which I kind of love that little bit of like, oh, man, this is going to have to come up. People's games are going to have to step up here if this is really going to happen, because otherwise the maneuvering on the other side is too quick and Otto is too conniving.
Well, I think that Otto Hightower kind of had an advantage because he knew that he didn't take anything for granted like Rhaenyra did. That was the problem. He knew that the Baratheons would be hard to get. He knew that the Tullys would be hard to get, so that's why he immediately started trying to get them and like offering something. And I like how the Aemon willing to take a wife is a callback to an earlier episode when Aegon was complaining about having to marry his sister. He's like, I'll marry whoever needs to be the house help. So if it supports the family, if it strengthens the family, I'm all for it. We see that here.
Oh, Brandon in the chat pointing out that the Tullys are Grover, Elmo, Kermit, and Oscar. So yeah, perfect.
All right, so now let's get into the big dragon showdown. And I love that the season ended with the dragon showdown because I think that's what was missing from this show, and that's something I think we're going to get a lot more in later seasons, of course. But we get our first one, and this is something I watched. I didn't realize this when watching the episode, but I heard a lot of commentary that was pointing out that dragon, and this is something we have seen earlier in the season, that dragons are kind of empathically connected to the writers. Like they feel what the writers do. And so people were pointing out that, Alyssa, do you know the name of Luke's dragon? I can't remember.
Oh, I did.
Munchie?
I knew it. Brandon will probably tell us in the chat.
Okay. But anyway,
I knew it, but I can't. I'm forgetting. Yeah.
So Luke's dragon was feeding off of Luke's fear, and his need to like just get the fuck out of it. Arex.
Thank you, Joseph.
Arax or Arex or something like that. But anyway,
Arex. Yeah, I knew
Arex. Arex was feeding off of Jace's fear, where Vhagar was feeding off of Aemon's anger. And this is a huge change from the books, or at least you could point it down to history, the historians getting it wrong. You You could play it that way too, sure. But the books really implied that Aemon just flat out murdered Jace. Luke, sorry.
Luke.
Getting mixed up. Yes, flat out murdered him. Where the show, I actually think I find it more dynamic. That apparently his intention was he just wanted an eye, and I think maybe he just wanted to scare the shit out of him. But the dragons kind of had a mind of their own, and this kind of someone pointed out that this plays to a line they had in season 1 or episode 1, where Viserys pointed out that dragons cannot be tamed. We think that we have control over them, but we really don't. Like, they're their own thing. And we see here that Eric's was just feeding off of Luke's fear, and so attacked Vhagar out of that fear. You could hear like I had the subtitles on because I couldn't hear what the fuck he was saying. But he was saying like, no, don't do this. Listen to me. And then Vhagar was pissed off about that and feeding off of Aemon's anger and like, well, fuck that. I'm going to kill this fucker for attacking me. And that's not what Aemon wanted. He was like, no, don't do this. And and so fucking kills him. You can see the look on Aemon's face of being like, fuck, this is not good. Because I think he's smart. He knows that he just ensured that Rhaenyra was going to go to war with him by doing this, and that's really not what he would do. But really, I think it's his fault for like chasing Luke in the first fucking place. He should have never put himself in that situation. But yeah, I think this is a change from the books because I've been reading, as I said, I've been reading this chapter today, and Aemon is definitely more of an asshole in the book than if you think he's bad in the show. In the book, he's straight out like total asshole. And I think the book kind of implied that, yeah, he just fucking killed that guy. Fuck that guy. But here, I like that nuance to it, that it wasn't intentional, and it was the dragons that sort of took over. And by the way, the scene was so beautifully shot. So I love, and you're talking about the size difference, I love when they're flying, we see that silhouette of Vhagar underneath Eric's like being much bigger. Like, oh my god, it's fucking dragon on dragon scene that was done shot so well. And I will say, even though I knew the outcome, and I think it actually made it worse knowing the outcome, because I knew Jace was going to die, and I was like, oh no. I was just like, and I think the scene does such a good job of building that tension and suspense. Alyssa, we'll start with you with this one.
Oh my god, this scene was so good. It was so beautifully shot. It might be my favorite scene of the season. Like, it was so beautifully shot. And it just was so tense. You could just feel the tension as Luke is riding through the storm. I love a good storm scene. You can use storms effectively. Sometimes some shows, movies have used storms in a very cheesy way and it doesn't work, but this was a very effective use of a storm to create fear. And he is riding in this dark storm, and all of a sudden this big ass dragon comes up, and you're like, oh no! It was so tense. I was right there with him. I felt it. It was just so good, so beautifully shot. Loved every minute of it. And then he gets into the clear skies, and you're like, oh, okay, well, he's safe now. It says he's in the clear skies, but no, no, he is not. And that is a good point about the dragons. I had forgotten about the line from Viserys from the beginning of the season. There is a line in the book about, I forget who said it, or I think it might have just been the historian writing it, the Grand Maester, Archmaester writing it, saying that dragons are not horses. They're not they're not as easy to tame. I think this is a good reminder of that. I think this is a good reminder that dragons are dangerous beasts. They're dangerous animals. And if you don't have complete control of them, then bad things can happen. And this is foretelling of what could happen in a war that they want to fight with dragons. You see Daemon trying to get more dragons because we're going to win this war with dragons. But this tells us like how dangerous it's going to be to fight a war with dragons. So I love that. And I definitely, absolutely love the humanization of Aemon. He is in the book, it's just straight up, yeah, I'm going to kill this fucker. Here, I love the actor. I love this actor, by the way. This is only the third episode he's been in, but I'm already sold on this actor. And yes, Brandon, you mentioned earlier, he does look just like Damon. I agree. And I think that's intentional because I think there's a lot of parallels between these two characters. But yeah, I love that they humanize him and show he's a kid. I think he's 20 in the book, so they might have changed his age slightly here. Maybe he's 18, but he's around that age where he's a kid just coming into manhood and to adulthood, where you see that look on his face. He is just a boy who's never killed a person before. I'm pretty sure. I don't think at this point he's ever killed anyone, and that wasn't his intent. And he's like, oh, fuck, I just killed my own nephew. Which, as we know in the world of Westeros, kinslayers not looked fondly upon. He is now a kinslayer. He has killed his own blood. And you just see the look on his face, like, oh fuck. And I love this change from the book. It's again, they've been humanizing Alicent a bit. They've humanized Rhaenyra a little bit more, where she is more thoughtful about her actions. And now we have Aemond really thinking about, oh, fuck, this is not what I wanted to do. But I'm curious to see what he does when he gets back to King's Landing next season. Because in the book, he comes back and he's like, yeah, I killed the fucker, yeah. But I wonder if he just going to own it? Is he just going to be like, yeah, I killed him so much? But we'll see. Alicent obviously will not be pleased because this is not all what she wanted. So I'll be curious to see how he reacts moving forward. But I found it so interesting that he clearly had that, oh, fuck, I didn't want to do this look on his face.
Yeah, and even if he didn't intend to kill him, as I said, it's still his fault for going out there in the first place and putting him in that situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's perfectly that, if you're going to release this weapon, you're not going to be able to control this weapon despite how much you want to do. I think it is a very cautionary tale that Aemon learning really quick. And you're right. I do appreciate the fact that you could see he pushed it too far, but he was just being a bully. And then again, he pulled out a gun, and in a gunfight, horrible things happen. Only this is a flying, fire-breathing gun that does what it wants. So yeah, I kind of love the intensity on that. Yeah, this is perfectly shot of just the terror, the fear. I love the fact that they spent a lot of time because you're looking in the clouds behind, looking for those wings, and you don't see them for a while. And I love that kind of builds up the, oh, where is it? Where? And then when you do, it's like, oh, you are not mistaken this dragon on top of your tiny little dragon. This is a giant dragon. It was beautifully done. To me, this is also showing is that none of these kids understand, or even I don't even know what the training is for dragon on dragon combat of having to use the environment. You've got a smaller dragon was able to get through those little cracks and crevices in between the towering rock walls where Vhagar couldn't. I love that. It was like, you got to dive down, find a place, hide. He'll lose you in the storm, but he's afraid and he's riding, and which is why as soon as he pulls up and gets away, pulls up in the sky, I'm like, oh, what are you doing? You were able to hide in the clouds. Now he can see you from anywhere. And that's what it's at. So again, blue skies are doom skies when you're being chased by a bigger dragon. You want to hide in the clouds.
Well, something that was brought up in the book, and I've heard other people bring up, is that they say that Erex, that Luke's dragon, is faster and more maneuverable than Vhagar, and would have been able to get away from him if it wasn't for the storm. It was the storm that doomed them because they couldn't maneuver as fast or as quick in the storm. Well, that's at least what the book lays out.
I mean, you do that. I was like, get down. You can find a place to hide, especially stay in the caverns. Don't get up out in the air. It's just you got to use your advantage the best that you can. Obviously, that's not the point of this particular scene. We're not seeing advanced, Top Gun dragon out there.
Reminded me of the Millennium Falcon, the way they would hide in the crevices and
Sure. But yeah, it was a beautifully done thing, and you get that moment of, is he going to get away? And then he's not, and then you're very clear that he has not made it. When there are pieces of dragon flying and dropping to the ground, I thought that was really well done, especially kind of watching as it fell and his whole reaction to, I didn't mean to go that far. Yeah, well, that's war. If you're going to push it, bad things happen. So again, it was tragic. It was not at all unexpected. But it also is the defining point, because, you lose a kid, man, there ain't going to be no stop after that.
Call me naive, but I have a strong feeling that if I hadn't read the books yet, but I didn't know what was happening, I would be thinking that maybe Luke would get out of there alive.
I was hoping so. Again, until he pulled up into the sky, it was like he's going to stay down. He figured it out. He got through the canyons. The minute he pulled up there, I was like, oh, yeah, no.
See, I had the opposite thought. Like, I was like, oh, he's home free now. Yeah, but anyway, so let's go ahead and get into that final scene where it's played all in silence, where we can definitely infer that Damon is bringing Rhaenyra the news that her son is dead, and you see that look of absolute rage, and as Daffy Duck loved to say, this means war. It's definitely, war is on. It doesn't matter what's going to happen. Now, I did love this scene, and I love the way that her face of rage was absolutely amazing, but I will bring up my tiny itsy bitsy tiny weeny complaint about this episode, and it's a very extremely minor. I want to stress that is that I kind of wish that we actually got her response to Otto Hightower. I wish she was like, well, Maester, get a pen and write out, I'm going to kill you all, blah blah blah. I think that would have felt like more of a finale ending. And this is, I think someone in the chat brought this up earlier. Like, to me, this didn't quite feel like a season finale. It felt like the end of a normal episode in the finale. I guess I was hoping that like a big montage where they showed all the various characters while the voiceover of Rhaenyra talking about how she's going to kill all the Hightowers. Like, I was kind of hoping that they would do that. But as I said, teensy weensy, insy bitsy tiny complaint. It was still amazing the way they played it, but it just didn't feel enough like the end of the season to me. But I know most people probably won't agree, but that's just how I thought. But anyway, Alyssa, let's start with you.
Yeah, I do strongly disagree with that, using the word strong, because we're never allowed to use the word strong without referring to the, but whatever. But yeah, I definitely disagree. I actually made a predictions. I'll plug my predictions review video at the end of this, but I made a prediction that it would end with a voiceover. And in my predictions review video, when I talked about how I got that wrong, I said what they did was way better than having had a voiceover. I think that the power of silence, the power of the facial expressions, again, the facial acting by Emma Darcy is just on point. That was way more powerful than any cheesy montage. I'm sorry, but or any cheesy voiceover. That would be a little too telegraphed, a little too hand-holdy. This is, explaining to the audience, like, I much prefer just the power of the facial expression. And I'm glad I got that prediction wrong, because this is way better. And it is a great ending for a finale, perfect ending for a finale. So I do disagree on that point. I thought this was a really powerful ending. I wouldn't have ended it any other way, personally. I think it worked really well.
Look, don't get me wrong. I love, and I do call out a lot of stuff when they do expressions and convey a lot of stuff through facial acting rather than dialogue. And I do think it's good here, but I kind of like those voiceover montages, and I kind of wanted it here. But as I said, that's just me. I understand not everyone would feel that way. I know.
I predicted that to happen, and I still prefer this. I think I like this better.
I am going to agree with both of you. I do like the ending here. I love it being quiet. I love it just be turning and that look on the face, because to me, yeah, it is said like, oh, that shit is on now. It was, you got her pained expression, the pained body language, and then the turn in the face of like the shift, which I thought was exactly what was needed, and I loved how it was done. Um, but I also got to kind of agree with Mark, is that I don't know if this entirely felt like a proper season finale and more of a middle one, or like an episode 9, like it was about to happen. Where it did make sense for a season finale, you want the "and we declare war" to be the finale, and then you dive into the war in the next one. So I totally get how that is. And I think maybe it's because while last episode, for me, because it was all in King's Landing, it was all kind of in one place, it was a little bit more focused, and that pulled up the tension. Whereas here, because we seem to have jumped to a couple of different places and focused on a couple of different characters through it, whether it be Rhaenyra or then Luke at the end and then the big dragon fight, I think maybe it felt a little more disjointed and thus more of a middle type episode. I think it was still awesome, but I think I can see how that feel is how people might feel that.
I agree to disagree.
Yeah, that's totally fair. But just my reaction when the episode was over is like, I gotta wait 2 years to see what happens next.
Hey, at least Rings of Power is already shooting their second season, so we don't have to wait as long.
Who gives a shit about that show?
Look, man, I just need some fantasy. If it's going to be my in between now and season 2 of House of Dragons, I
want more House of Dragon.
So I got to point out in the chat, Jakes, when I see you say sorry about my wild beasts, I am thinking your dragons, like, because given the conversation we were having earlier about the dragons and the wild beasts, keep your dragons under control, Darrin. Tell your to keep your dragons under control.
They were barking at a lot. I kept hitting my mute button so it wouldn't get too loud in here. But they're all quiet now. Thanks.
All right, so Brandon says, I'm with Alyssa on this one, and Allison says, agree, Mark. So we're already dividing. As I said, very, very minor.
The blacks versus the greens right here.
Clearly the blacks.
All right, so I think we covered the episode now, but before we leave, there is a bonus thing I wanted to talk about really quickly. Is apparently I've read this article, there are 5, well actually 6, but we'll really talk about 5 because we don't know anything about the 6th one. 5 Game of Thrones prequel shows in development. So I recently heard a rumor that 2 of them are being scrapped. So I want to start with those 2 because I don't know if this rumor is true. Maybe it's not true. Maybe it is. But the first one, and one of them I hope is scrapped because I don't want it. I don't want it, Jon Snow. But anyway, the other one I would be disappointed if it was scrapped because I'm looking forward to. So the first one that I'm kind of think should be scrapped is a Sea Snake prequel, where we see Corlys Valerian go on his world adventures before the events of House of the Dragon. Do we need that? Like, that seems so unnecessary to me.
The sea snake in a Game of Thrones reference, I can only think of one thing, and it's not safe for work, is all I'm saying.
I actually heard one of the other YouTubers or podcasts that I listened to at one point said, "Oh, wouldn't it be cool if we got a sea snake prequel and see all his adventures?" And I was like, "No, no, it wouldn't be. It would not. No, I don't want that either. No, hopefully that is scrapped."
Yeah. So the other one, which I don't want to be scrapped, and in fact, it was the one I was most looking forward to, was the one with Nymeria and her conquering Dorne, escaping with all these ships and trying to, like, there were slaves in Essos and escaping and eventually ending up on Dorne and conquering Dorne. Apparently, there's rumors that prequel is going to be canceled as well. I kind of wanted to see that.
I would go for that one. That would be that's an interesting story.
And so now we'll get to one that apparently is probably going to be the next one to air. That seems to be super confirmed. And it's the one I want the least, and that's the Jon Snow sequel show. And I believe I've been hearing things that started pre-production already, and it's
it's happening. It's already in pre-production.
Adventures in the
don't
Cold
want it.
War.
I don't want it. The only thing, I mean, unless they want to fix the ending of Game of Thrones and like maybe that, I would be okay if like, oh, the Night King is still alive. Arya didn't really kill him, so now we actually will follow through with the prince that was promised and all that, and then Jon Snow goes down and Bran dies and he becomes king because he's the prince's promise. I don't know, like if they actually in some way fix the ending of Game of Thrones, that would be the only thing that I could see getting out of it. But they're not going to do that. I don't want it. I don't want it.
Yeah, Brandon says no to Jon Snow. Brittenberg says season 8 was terrible, but I think there are some interesting directions you could take a Jon Snow show. Maybe. And I heard furthermore that this was pitched by Kit Harington, who infamously was not extremely happy with season 8. But I think that I also heard specifically that they were not going to fix season 8. That was just going to focus on Jon up in the north with the wildlings. And I'm like, well, how interesting could that be?
Well, yeah, I mean, all of the interesting stuff was the White Walkers and stuff, and now it's just like, well, what you doing? Well, it's cold out. Well, it's always cold out here.
And okay, so the one thing I could think could redeem it if they find more like history and background and lore that it fleshes out the whole White Walker thing and gives it meaning, I suppose.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, I like Kit Harington. I like Kit Harington in the role. If there was an interesting story that you could do with it, then I would totally support it. I just don't really understand what is the story that you would be telling that would be interesting enough to want to re-enter that part of that time frame of the world, because I think it's like if you leave the north, it will just piss people off because they're like, we don't want to care about anything else, damn it, we'll just deal with the north.
I think the Jon Snow should be about him going back to King's Landing and be like, okay, I'm assuming my crown because fucking Grey Worm fucked off, so here we go, I'm the king now.
Well, that's what I was saying. Yeah, I mean, I agree with Darrin. Like, I just don't know what story they could do with this to make it interesting. I will never complain about seeing Kit Harington on screen. Don't get me wrong, but I just don't know what they can do with this.
You obviously never seen the movie Pompeii. God, that movie was awful.
No, I never saw that.
I like Kit Harington as Jon Snow. Okay, look, and look, I thought he was fine in Eternals. They only gave him like 5 minutes, but I mean, he so
his character was unnecessary.
Yeah, well, those are all bigger questions. But yeah, I mean, again, if they can find an interesting story, sure, but is it
so? Brittenberg saying if Jon Snow has children with the wildling wife, they could be the last Targaryens and might try to claim the Iron Throne.
Oh no!
But they'll have snow dragons.
They'll have snow dragons. All right, can we move on to the next show?
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about Jon Snow anymore. I'm curious because I haven't heard of any of these shows other than the Jon Snow one, so I'm curious what they are.
All right, so the next show, and I think I mentioned this to you once before, is apparently also going full steam ahead. Not as full as the Jon Snow, but so far wheels are in motion. Is Duncan Egg, Knight of the Seven Kingdom. I haven't read these books, so if they do the show, I'm going to have to read the books first. But from my understanding, is that it's more about two guys. Like it's not a Game of Thrones sprawling all these different people in all these different parts of the world. It's more focused. It takes place in between House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones. I think it's like 70 years before Game of Thrones.
Yeah, closer to Game of Thrones than House of the Dragon.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, if they do this, apparently, like George R. R. Martin had said, George R. R. Martin has said before he doesn't want a sequel to Game of Thrones, but apparently he's involved with this Jon Snow sequel. And he had once said he never wants Duncan Egg to be adapted, but apparently changed his mind on that as well. Because
they gave him all this money.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
his specific worry about Duncan Egg is he hasn't finished the last book yet, and that's what gives me pause.
Man, they ain't learning. They ain't learning nothing, are they?
Yeah.
I read one of them, or I guess technically, like Brandon used, I had the audiobook of the Knights of the Seven Kingdoms. And I mean, yeah, it's definitely a more focused story. It doesn't really have anything to do with palace intrigue. It's them out and then dealing with some stuff out there and a little back and forth. I mean, it's kind of a better focused adventure, and it doesn't have all of the giant mechanics on there. Is it interesting enough that people will want to watch? I don't know.
Well, people like the books, so
Okay. Well, I mean, I'll certainly give it a shot. I'm familiar with it, but it is interesting because it doesn't deal so much with all of the big palace mechanics. This is out in Westeros stuff going down. So
palace mechanics is what makes it interesting, though. I don't know. I actually read a comic book version of this. I guess the first book. I know.
Yeah.
And I remember because there's been rumors that they're going to make this for a long time, and I remember thinking they shouldn't make this into a show. A movie maybe, but I don't. How do you get a whole show out of that? I don't know. I'm not excited about it. I'm just going to be honest.
If I remember, it's a collection of short stories, right? They weren't like full.
Yeah. Was that what it was? Maybe I don't. Then I might have read multiple. I can't remember. I've read multiple short stories, possibly.
Because isn't the Night of the Seven Kingdoms a collection of all the short stories?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Again, I got the audiobook, so to me, it was more of like one giant tale happening in different places and things. So I could see how it might be short stories that are all.
Brandon is saying it's 3 novels. Okay.
Okay.
I'll take his word on that. 3 novels. Anyway, so yeah, that's the possibility. And so the last one is, and I think I might have mentioned this before as well. Apparently, there's 2 animated shows they're thinking of doing, but the one I have no idea. Nobody knows. No one's saying what that's about. So the one we do know what it's about is about the Empire of E10. The supposed to be east of Ashai, like further east is like the China in the Game of Thrones world that nobody really knows anything about. And I don't know, like I'm curious to see what they would do with this. I'm kind of assuming that they would, since Game of Thrones is mostly based off of English and European history, that they would make this based off of Chinese and Asian history loosely, and perhaps maybe hire some Chinese historians and sort of follow that line. But it seems like it'd be so detached from anything going on in what we know of Game of Thrones. Is like, what's kind of the point? I don't know. Maybe they find a way to tie it in. It's a bit closer to Ashai. Maybe they could bring up more about Ashai. I don't know. So I'm just, and a lot of people really have that reaction. That's the reaction I heard about this ET show. It's like, do we need this? Like, I don't know. I think it might be interesting.
So I did a video way back when, before Game of Thrones was off the air, about possible sequels, prequels that I would like to see. And one that I said I wanted to see would be one on Ashai. Like I want to see the East explored, but not necessarily ET. They're both in. They're talked about in the World of Ice and Fire, and I would watch that show. I would be curious to see what they would do with it. I'd be more interested in Ashai, though. I'd be more interested in like kind of the mystical part of it. But it might be interesting to see like what else is happening in the world. Like with us Americans thinking we're the center of the world, the Westeros thinks we're the center of the world, but there's other things happening in the world. So I would be curious. I definitely would be curious to see that. I would check it out, but I would be more interested if it was focused on Ashai.
I do wonder if they would have maybe there's some different versions of dragons, different creatures, since we know nothing about this area. Like maybe there's some other magic and stuff we don't know about.
Yeah.
I'm just surprised, and why isn't there a bigger call for Arya's pirate adventures? Come on, man. That's
we were
what
gonna
I
do
want to
it-
see. Head to
we
the
were gonna-
west,
yeah.
pirate ships.
I'd
Fuck
rather
the
get
sea
that than a
snake.
Jon. I'd
Yeah,
rather
if we
get
were
that
gonna
than a
do any
Jon Snow
sequel at
sequel.
all, yeah, if we were gonna do a sequel, it would rather be that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Arya was my favorite character.
Yeah.
I freaking loved her. I loved her taking out the Night King. I don't care what anybody else says. The girl kicks ass, and I'm all about that. The only reason I would kind of be more interested almost in a sequel series to a prequel series is just because of the unexplored territory and the not knowing what's going to happen. So, yeah, I mean, going off to the east and what's happening there, fine. It's the one downside of some of these. I mean, it was exciting about Game of Thrones is you kind of knew what was going to happen, but not how it was going to wrap up because some of the books were written and some not.
With the ET thing, we have no idea what time it would be set. It could be set in the present. Could be set in the past.
I mean, it'd be fine. I'm not quite as interested in an animated story with all of this as I am with a live action, just because to me Westeros is live action, and I'm excited about what you can do with that. But though, hey, you never know. Arya could show up with this Jon Snow up in the north, and there could be Northern Pirate Ice Adventures. Ice Pirates. You could call it Ice Pirates.
So I talked about how there's another animation that we don't know what it is, but I think I figured it out. It's the Arya's direwolf Nymeria and her adventures, and it's going to be her and all these other direwolves going off to the adventures in Westeros.
The kids would love that. Wolf adventures in Westeros. Yeah,
and they better talk, and they better be talking.
Yeah, that's right. They have to talk. You're gonna, let's do the whole thing.
They're definitely gonna rip the heads off of some random guy walking down the road as well.
It's like if a Disney animated film had a nightmare, would be the Game of Thrones Wolf show.
Oh god.
Brandon, Ice Pirates was not an animated sci-fi; it was an actual movie from the 80s.
Yeah, with Robert Urich.
Robert Urich. Yeah, I watched that way too many times when I was homesick from school when I was a kid.
I love that movie. So goofy. It was awesome.
Very thankfully and blissfully, I do not remember it at all.
You watched it, Mark. If you see it again, you would remember it. It was so cheesy. It was so cheesy.
Then he went into those Total Recall mind wipe machines afterwards. Was like, get rid of this movie from my head.
So Brandon's saying, I think the Dance of Dragons is based on the anarchy in England between 1135 to 1154 when two cousins fought for the English crown. Okay. Yeah, a lot of it is based off of English history. So yeah, and there's some European history mixed in as well. And yes, hello to Duke Chronic. Always seem to join right when we're about to leave. So anyway, great to see you. You can always go back and watch the rest of it. But yeah, I think that is about it. I think we will wrap up now. And I want to thank everyone for joining us. Brenton Berger, Brendan Howells. I think we had Allison in here earlier. Joseph, everyone for who joined us live. Thanks so much, and everyone watching us in the archives. Of course, thank you for joining. And special thanks, shout out to my special guests. First, we'll start with Darrin. If you want to let everyone know where they can find you, what are you up to nowadays?
Hi, I'm Darrin from D's Reviews. I used to be here every Monday, but now we don't have a show to talk about anymore. No, I've been just wrapped up with Mark and Alyssa actually covering She-Hulk over on my channel, D's Reviews. I'm on a little break now for the holidays. So the next thing I definitely have planned up is way up in the next year is, of course, for Secret Invasion. When that comes out, there'll definitely be chats on my channel. Between now and then, there's been a discussion about with Rob over on Smirking Reviews of doing a discussion on the Daredevil series that was on Netflix. We might be doing that. There will definitely be a show coming up when Andor ends, because that show rocks. It's currently my favorite thing on the air, and I am loving every episode of it. So when that wraps up, we'll definitely have a big discussion on that. Otherwise, you can check out past reviews of Westworld and various other sci-fi and Marvel shows over in the archives on my channel, D's Reviews. Alyssa?
So wait, before we get to Alyssa,
Yeah.
I did want Darrin, if you want to have me on for a Andor discussion, we can continue our tradition of being in opposite ends of the
Yes.
because I don't hate the show, but I think it's a bit overhyped personally.
Yeah, I'm actually on Mark's team on this. Like, I'm actually really enjoying the recent episodes. I still think the first 3 didn't need to be there at all. I don't know.
No.
But I am enjoying. I'm enjoying it. I do think it's a bit overhyped, but I am enjoying it. So
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm enjoying these middle episodes. You're right. The first 3, it was a little bit of a rough start, but I'm getting into the political intrigue. I mean, we talk about this Game of Thrones. You give me a political intrigue Star Wars show, I will be all about that.
yeah.
So that woman who was like running the little rebel section on that planet where they did the heist, like for like 3 episodes, I was like, "Who is she? I've seen this actress before," and finally looked it up, and it's the waif from Game of Thrones. I'm like,
Oh, that's awesome. See, it all comes around, man. It all comes around.
That is so awesome. Anyways, please come to Listen Jane's Reviews. That is my channel. So, big announcement. While we were talking, I was uploading my House of the Dragon Season 1 review. It is now up there. So, if you haven't got enough of me talking about House of the Dragon with Mark and Darrin, you can go and just watch me by myself saying a lot of the same things, but different things too, on my Season 1 review with a focus on the second half of the season. And the second part of that video is my predictions review, because halfway through the season, I made predictions based on the book. When I originally made the predictions, they were for book readers only because they spoiled things. Now anybody can watch them because all that stuff has happened or not happened. It's all stuff that's out there. So anybody can watch my predictions. I was very careful to keep them spoiler free. If you didn't watch the first video, then the predictions will be new to you, but I will tell you what I predicted and what I got right and what I got wrong. I got some of them right, but I definitely got some wrong. So that was a lot of fun to make. So go check that out. First half of the video is the Season 1 review. Second half of the video is my predictions review. So please check that out. And additionally, if you have read the book Fire and Blood, I do plan on dropping a full-on book spoilers video later this week where I will kind of speculate where I think the show will go from here, what they'll do in the second season. I'm going to talk about the third season and the fourth season too. I'm going to talk about everything. It'll be full. I'm talking about the end of everything, so it'll be full-on spoilers. So it'll definitely only be for people who have read the source material. But that video is coming out later this week. And in addition to that, I will be doing episode 10 of Lower Decks review this week, followed up by, I guess, Mark, we go ahead and make this announcement now. I believe we are planning our discussion on Lower Decks Season 3 on Saturday. Is that what we agreed to?
Yes.
Saturday, 6 o'clock West Coast, 9 o'clock East Coast time. Mark and I will be doing a Season 3 discussion. And that's going to be on my channel, right? Is that what we agreed to? Yeah. Yes, it'll be over on my channel. So lots of fun stuff upcoming. So go check it out.
Cool. And on the topic of book spoiler predictions, another announcement. Next Monday, me and Alyssa will be back to talk more House of Dragon. What? So I decided that I had so much I want to say about what I think is going to happen in season 2 and maybe future seasons as well, based on the book. So this will be a book spoiler full discussion. So if you haven't read the book, don't want to be spoiled. If you don't care about being spoiled, then sure. Like apparently mine and Alyssa's mother, I had a conversation with her today and she was telling me the very ending of the Dance with Dragons. I'm like, why are you reading all these spoilers? It happens at the end. She's like, oh, I didn't know. But anyway, so if you're like that and don't care about spoilers, you can join us. We may or may not be joined by Don Willie next next Monday as well. Get his book expertise. So yes, one more House of the Dragon, but it's book spoilery exclusive. Sorry, but I did want to get into that. Anyway, if you're finding me for the first time, my name is Mark. My channel is Enchantment of Eternity, and I also will be covering the finale of Lower Decks. I will be covering Prodigy as that airs, and I'm starting my new direction of the channel where I'm going to try to review every episode of Star Trek that I have yet to review in order. And I've already got like maybe 8 videos already recorded, ready to go for the original series, which I'm starting with watching that show twice in 1 year. Anyway, that's what I decided to do. I've decided that I am going to expose myself to overacting. Anyway. Anyway, you can check out Enchantment of Eternity for that and many more goodies. So thank you so much for joining, and we'll see you all next time.